Chapter 12:26. Meg's explanation came to an abrupt end, but his expression had already surpassed any verbal expression. Those who were close to him could still hear the crisp sound of his teeth crunching the tripe. It was so beautiful that they couldn't help but imagine the chewiness of his teeth. Gulp. There was the sound of saliva being swallowed around them. What a strange way of eating. It's just a small piece of tripe, but it's so exquisite. This Mr. Mac is really an expert when it comes to eating. Vanessa secretly praised in her heart. She swallowed her saliva and looked at the various ingredients placed on the dining cart. Could it be that every ingredient had its own way of eating? The most important thing about boiling tripe is time. It'll look old if it's cooked for a long time, and it'll have a fishy smell if it's cooked for a short time. But there shouldn't be any problems if you follow the guide. Meg smiled at Mia and the others, then gestured to the small portions of tripe beside them. Everyone, try it. I'll try it too. Amy carefully picked up a piece of tripe with her chopsticks, then copied Meg and put it into the pot. After a while, she picked it up again and repeated the action until the tripe bubbled. Then, she dipped the tripe in the sparkling red soup into the dipping dish, then put it to her mouth and blew on it before putting it into her mouth. Amy's eyes lit up. She chewed the tripe happily with her small teeth and made little hamster noises. Her delicate little face was full of happiness. After swallowing, she immediately picked up another piece of tripe and carefully put it into the pot. She said happily, "The tripe is so delicious. I want to eat more. And boiling it is so fun." Anna also accurately picked up a piece of tripe and put it into the pot to boil. She precisely followed Meg's instructions and soon finished boiling a piece of tripe and ate it. Those who had previously questioned the way to eat hot pot were now speechless. After all, this was something that a 4- or 5-year-old girl could do. It was too difficult to say that it was too difficult. Most people couldn't afford to lose face like this. Most importantly, smelling the increasingly tempting spicy aroma, watching the table of people happily chewing on the tripe, and listening to their praises from time to time, while they could only watch quietly from the side. This feeling was too painful. Duck intestines are eaten in the same way as tripe. Meg picked up a long piece of duck intestine and dipped it into the hot pot. After a few dips, the duck intestine began to curl up. He rolled it around in the dipping sauce before putting it into his mouth. The perfect heat allowed the crispness of the duck intestines to be released perfectly. The spicy red soup removed the fishy smell of the duck intestines and gave the duck intestines a wonderful taste. The sound of slurping and slurping almost made one want to chew their tongue. Oh, so spicy. Yabamiya ate a mouthful of tripe, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her chest rose and fell slightly, and faint golden dragon scales appeared on her forehead. "Let's have clear soup." Elizabeth gently placed her hand on Mia's wrist. A cold aura instantly enveloped her, and the dragon scales that were about to emerge retracted. Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth, and realized something as well. She nodded slightly. "This tripe and duck intestines are so delicious. It's as if they were made by me. It gives me a sense of accomplishment." Gina picked up a piece of duck intestine and put it into the red soup. Her face was full of smiles. She was very excited to be able to participate in the cooking. Fat beef is a very important part of the meat in the hot pot. It's a high-quality eye beef. It's fat and lean, and it's shaped like an eye. That's how it gets its name. It's bright and soft in color, and it's cut into paper-thin slices. Once it's cooked in the hot pot, it can be taken out immediately. Meg picked up a paper-thin piece of fresh fat beef and put it into the boiling hot pot. The bright red color quickly turned white, and then it was covered in a layer of beautiful red. He lifted it out of the pot, rolled the steaming fat beef in the dipping sauce, and covered it with sesame oil and sauce. Then, he put it into his mouth. The fat beef had perfectly absorbed the taste of the thick soup, and the tender and delicate texture was mesmerizing. It was tender and soft, and as fine as silk. As he chewed carefully, the fragrance of the meat quickly filled his entire mouth. It was irresistible. Pig's brain, a delicacy that mortals wouldn't dare to try, lotus root slices, the best of the vegetarian dishes in the hot pot, enoki mushroom, the representative of the mushrooms in the hot pot. Meg would give a simple description of each dish he ate, but he refused to reveal how it tasted. He would let them experience it with confidence based on his expression. Oh my God! What did I do wrong? Is there any law here? Kill me. I don't want to suffer such a sin here. Am I the only one who envies the staff's meal? Is Mr. Mac still hiring waiters? I don't want to be paid as long as I eat. Sister, count me in. The surrounding customers watched the table of people eating happily. Their scalps went numb, and their limbs went cold. They swallowed their saliva violently, and felt that they were going crazy. Hot pot is so interesting, and it looks delicious. I wonder if I can eat it today. Vanessa looked at the soup pot on the table with sparkling eyes. Miss, how can you cook by yourself? This isn't something you should do, Laura said softly, shaking her head. Meat dishes can be cooked, and so can vegetarian dishes. Then, is this hot pot considered a meat dish or a vegetarian dish? Randy stood at the side, holding his chin as he fell into deep thought. Gourmet, I heard that Mr. Mac released a new product today. Are you conflicted? Are you uncomfortable? A pair of meaty hands patted Randy's shoulder from behind. Abraham squeezed out of the crowd and asked Randy with a smile. See for yourself. Whoever sees this new product will be conflicted. Randy crossed his arms and gestured to the front. Amy's is full of villains today. Abraham was shocked when he saw Amy's staff's meal. He looked around at the resentful expressions on the surrounding customers' faces and clicked his tongue in wonder. Isn't that so? It's fine if they eat first, but we can only watch. Harrison nodded in agreement. Then, he squeezed out a smile and looked at Amy, who was boiling the duck intestine, and asked, Little boss, is this duck intestine crispy? Amy lifted the curled-up duck intestine and floated it in front of Harrison. Then, she swam it in the dipping sauce and said with a smile, Listen carefully. Crunch, crunch. Amy put the duck intestine into her mouth and chewed happily. Then, she swallowed it and looked at Harrison, asking, Does it sound crispy to you? Crispy. Harrison nodded with a strange expression and forced a smile. What could he do? He was also in despair. When could he cheat a piece of food from Little Boss? It was still a long way to go. Miss, Laura tugged at Vanessa's sleeve and gestured for her to pay attention to Abraham, who was standing behind her on the right. Uncle Abraham. Vanessa's eyes lit up. Under Laura's protection, she carefully moved to Abraham's side and gently tugged at his sleeve. Abraham turned his head and was slightly stunned when he saw Vanessa, who was wearing a veil. Who was this girl? Uncle, it's me, Vanessa said softly. Calm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 12:27. Abraham swallowed the rest of the word, but he still looked at Vanessa as if he had seen a ghost. Why are you here? If Uncle can come, why can't I? Vanessa said confidently. Then, she grumbled, Moreover, there's such a good place. Isn't it too much for you to come here alone? You used to say that you would bring me to eat all the good food. Isn't this place too far? Even if I wanted to bring you here, your father wouldn't agree. Abraham felt a little wronged. Although he used to bring Vanessa around to look for good food, that was in Rodu, after all. Furthermore, there were many powerhouses protecting them secretly. However, judging from Vanessa's attire, she most likely ran out on her own. He wondered if His Majesty knew that she had already come to Chaos City. This lass had always been obedient. He didn't know what kind of guts she had to come to Chaos City. It's all right. I'm already here. When we go back after dinner, you can send a message to my father. Tell him that I'm eating and drinking here, and that he doesn't have to worry. We'll go back when we're done eating, Vanessa said smilingly. Indeed. Abraham's smile was a little bitter. This lass had indeed snuck out on her own. Now, she was even pushing the blame to him. This was going to be troublesome. Uncle, who's this lady? Randy turned around to look at Vanessa curiously. Although her face was covered by a veil, her golden eyes were exceptionally bright and pure, just like a clear spring. He could not help but take a few more glances at her. My niece. Abraham took a step forward and blocked Randy's view. Although he felt that this young man was rather interesting after interacting with him during this period of time, he couldn't have any ideas about Vanessa, even if it was just a little spark. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to answer to His Majesty when he went back. This lady is beautiful and elegant. She really doesn't look like you at all, Randy said with a smile. Nice to meet you, I'm Vanessa. Vanessa introduced herself generously. Although she was not very willing to interact with others because of her teeth, she felt a sense of relaxation after coming here, as if she had found an organization. She wanted to get to know some people who also liked good food and make friends with them. Hello, Miss Windsor. I'm Randy, a food critic. Randy smiled. It was rare to see such a clean and elegant lady. Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she asked curiously, Oh. Since you're a food critic, which food magazine do you write for? She had read almost all of the gourmet magazines on the Norland continent, and as long as they were of decent quality, she wouldn't miss a single issue. Randy shrugged and humbly said, I recently started a column on carnivore, but it's more amateur. Carnivore. Vanessa pondered for a moment, and her eyes suddenly lit up. I remember now. Are you the carnivore Randy who swore to bring the most delicious meat to the readers? You've read my articles. I read every issue. Mr. Randy's articles are all very interesting. I didn't expect to meet a loyal fan here. It's really touching, Randy said excitedly. He suddenly felt a little smug. He didn't expect there to be a beautiful young lady who liked his words so much. She probably already had a crush on him. Vanessa has a habit of reading every issue of all the gourmet magazines. Abraham interrupted Randy's imagination. I see. Randy was stunned, and touched his nose awkwardly. In that case, all the gourmets on the Norland continent were lucky enough to enjoy this young lady's follower treatment. Yes, I like to see you guys sharing your food. Words can give people more imagination, and let people know more about food. Vanessa nodded with a smile. You'd better think about how you're going to submit your article for this month to the editor first, Abraham said gloatingly. Abraham gloated. This guy had always bragged about his literary talents in front of him, but now he was saying that his literary talents were mediocre in front of a little girl. He had to be on guard against him. It's all right. I'll definitely be able to write it when I get back today. Randy waved his hand nonchalantly. He was very confident in himself, and didn't continue to pay attention to Vanessa. Instead, he continued to watch Meg and the rest eat hot pot. The hot pot lasted for almost an hour. There were already a few layers of onlookers at the restaurant's entrance. Many passers-by thought there was a duel, and came to watch the show. However, they realized that this large group of people was actually watching others eat. Furthermore, they were watching with relish. They cried out that they had been tricked, and then watched with relish. Meg, who was sweating profusely from eating, held a colander and swam around the pot. He put the last few pieces of small potatoes into Amy and Anna's bowls, and officially announced the end of dinner for the day. The moment he put down the colander, Meg only felt satisfied. He had never had such a satisfying hot pot meal before. The best ingredients, the rich soup pot, the perfect dipping sauce, and the people who wanted to eat hot pot together. This was a perfect hot pot meal. Hot pot is so delicious, Amy said happily as she chewed on the potatoes. Yabamiya and the rest were also very satisfied. Although the meal time was twice as long as usual, this novel way of eating was indeed very interesting, and the taste was rich and delicious. It's so satisfying. In the restaurant, Connie slumped on the chair with a satisfied smile. The tip of her tongue was still a little numb, and all the pores on her body seemed to have opened up. It was as if she had just experienced a satisfying battle, and her body and mind were in a state of extreme pleasure. Other than the tripe and duck intestine, the two of them had finished all the other dishes. So, although the pig's brain is a little stupid, it's unusually delicious. It's just like tofu pudding. Camilla was still reminiscing about the pig's brain that she had just eaten. If that's the case, will my brain be very delicious too? Connie was deep in thought. It might be even more delicious, Camilla said after thinking seriously. The two of them looked at each other's brains and fell silent. Everyone, please wait in line for a moment. We'll take a short break, and we'll open for business at 5 sharp, Meg stood up and said to the surrounding customers. Mia and the rest had already started to clear the table. The crowd dispersed, and soon there were 2 long lines. Now I understand why so many people are willing to wait in line. Such delicious food is worth the wait. Vanessa stood in the line with an expectant smile on her face. Chapter 12:28. The hot pot had refreshed the customers' fixed mindset of only eating and not eating. It had also successfully proved that the customers could also get delicious food if they participated. The novel way of eating and the delicious experience that made people salivate crazily raised the customers' expectations for the hot pot to the extreme. However, what made people feel uncomfortable was that although they were salivating, they had no chance to taste the hot pot tonight. Because the designated hot pot area was still under renovation, the specific opening date had not been set. I think Mr. Mack did it on purpose. This guy is very bad. Randy sighed. Although he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Mr. Mack has a creative way of cooking that is like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky. He wants the customers to accept and learn quickly. He personally demonstrates it. Isn't this the quality that an excellent chef and restaurant owner should have? Vanessa praised. She looked at Meg, who had turned and walked into the restaurant, with admiration in her eyes. He already has a child, Abraham said carefully. Abraham asked carefully, trying to figure out what she was thinking. If she fell in love with a cook, it would be a very bad thing. But there are so many good ladies lining up to become Little Boss's stepmother. Randy's voice was filled with envy. Yes, that little elf is so cute. Vanessa could not help but nod. She was so adorable when she saw Amy eating just now. Cough, cough. Well, what do you want to eat today? Uncle's treat. Abraham coughed dryly and changed the topic. I want to eat eggplant with garlic sauce. It's the dish that Derek, the gourmet from the previous issue of Vegetarianism, wrote about. I've been thinking about it for half a month. I've even dreamed about it several times, Vanessa blurted out, her eyes full of anticipation. She had left the palace because of this dish. That's indeed a delicacy. Abraham nodded. He had also been obsessed with eggplant with garlic sauce for some time. Vegetarianism. Randy raised his eyebrows. As a loyal fan of carnivory, he did not expect the lady in front of him to be bewitched by a vegetarian demon. This would not do. There was still a long way to go to promote carnivory, and he had to start from the front. Miss Windsor, as a carnivore, I'm actually more willing to recommend you to try Mamie's meat. Mr. Mac's beef kebabs can be said to be the best in the barbecue world. The spicy grilled fish subverts your imagination of grilled fish. The fatty but not greasy Peking roast duck, the spicy and sour steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, the beggar's chicken born in a mud shell. Meat is the main character of this restaurant, and also the main character of our lives, Randy said sincerely. Although I think I can only trust half of what this guy says, what he said is true. In Mamie's, meat is the real star. Abraham nodded. After coming here, he had put on another round of weight. It was all because of that damned meat. But I still want to try the eggplant with garlic sauce first. Vanessa smiled. Of course, I won't miss any of the delicacies in the restaurant, whether it's meat or vegetarian. That's a wise choice. Abraham nodded. He liked Vanessa because her personality was similar to his. As long as it was a delicacy, they would not care who made it or what ingredients were used. They would just eat it. But Randy still tried to say something. Mr. Randy, have you tried the eggplant with garlic sauce before? Vanessa asked Randy. Yes, I have. Randy nodded and said awkwardly, but that's because the name of the dish says fish. I thought it was a meat dish. Is it delicious? It's really fragrant. Randy nodded with a complicated expression. Although he was unwilling to admit it, as a gourmet, he did not want to lie about delicacies. Then, after I eat the eggplant with garlic sauce, I'll try the delicacies that Mr. Randy just recommended, Vanessa said with a smile. She had a good impression of Randy's honesty. Meg and the others packed up and returned to the restaurant. Seeing Connie and Camilla staring at each other's heads, he could not help but feel puzzled. What are you doing? We're thinking about whose head is more delicious. Connie looked up at Meg. Isn't a pig's head very delicious? The restaurant suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at Connie and Camilla with a complicated expression. It seems like your heads are still comparable to a pig's. Meg nodded. Both of them heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. If they could not even compare to a pig's, it would be too embarrassing. I'm full. I'm leaving. Camilla got up and walked towards the kitchen. Goodbye, Sister Camilla. Amy waved at Camilla. Then, she suddenly thought of something. Are you coming again tonight? No. Camilla's face turned red immediately. She quickened her pace and disappeared into a cloud of black fog in the blink of an eye. Everyone looked at Meg curiously. There seemed to be a lot of information hidden in Amy's words. I'm going to take a shower and change my clothes. Everyone, get ready to open for business. Meg walked towards the staircase quietly. The more he explained, the more confused he would become. The best plan was to escape. Amy, did Camilla sleep in the restaurant last night? Mia's gossipy soul had already started to burn. Everyone looked at Amy curiously. No. Amy shook her head. It seemed like she had to keep this a secret for her father. Everyone did not quite believe Amy's contradictory words. However, they were about to open for business, so it was not appropriate for them to ask any more questions. Connie, send this Buddha jumps over the wall to your master. Then, you're done for the day. Meg went downstairs and packed a serving of Buddha jumps over the wall from the kitchen. He handed it to Connie and said, learn well from your master. Okay. Connie took the Buddha jumps over the wall and nodded solemnly. I promise to complete the mission. Meg looked at Connie's back and couldn't help but remind him, also, remember to go through the main entrance this time. Don't keep climbing over people's walls. Connie turned around and said helplessly, but my master asked me to climb over the wall. He said he wanted to test how far I can go today. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed like Connie's master was not simple. He actually used the Bowtie prison as his disciples' training ground. He was the deputy warden, so he could not say anything. He waved his hand and said, "All right, then we'll do as your master said." Connie went out fully armed. Meg looked at the time. It was exactly 5:00. He walked towards the restaurant's entrance and pushed open the restaurant's door. He looked at the long line of customers outside and smiled. Welcome to Amy's. Chapter 12:29. Randy, Abraham, Vanessa, and Laura happened to share a table. Vanessa looked around the restaurant curiously. The wooden railings cleverly separated the restaurant, preventing the awkwardness of having to sit back to back. There were green plants in transparent aquaponics bottles hanging on the railings, and exquisite murals painted on the walls, depicting the sceneries of various parts of the Norland continent. What an exquisite restaurant! Vanessa couldn't help but gasp in admiration. It wasn't resplendent, but every detail was exquisite and moving. The comfortable color of the wood and the tender green plants made one feel calm and peaceful in the midst of it. What was even more amazing was that the customers here would consciously share a table. The humans and orcs sat together, and the elves and demons sat opposite each other. Surprisingly, there weren't any intense arguments. Some even greeted each other as if they had already become friends. Such a scene could never be seen in Rodu. Or rather, it couldn't be seen after exiting this restaurant. Laura was also looking around in surprise. At the same time, she was wary of the orc sitting next to her. If this tall and big guy wanted to do something to the princess, she could only hug his leg and buy some time for the princess to escape. Is there no private room? Miss doesn't like to eat with others, Laura asked softly. Mamie's doesn't provide private rooms, and if you can't gather 4 people, you can only share a table with strangers, Randy explained. He glanced at Vanessa's veil. This young lady's eyes are so beautiful. Why does she have to wear this veil? Does it matter? Abraham looked at Vanessa with a hint of worry in his eyes. He knew about Vanessa's teeth problem, and that she almost didn't participate in any large-scale palace banquets in the past few years. However, Randy was right. Mamie's didn't provide private rooms, and Mr. Mack wouldn't specially cook for Vanessa. This was his restaurant. He set the rules, and even the city lord of Chaos City had to follow them here. It's all right, let's eat here. I like this environment. Vanessa shook her head and removed her veil. Her delicate face and fair skin made Randy, who was sitting opposite her, fall into a trance for a moment. Me. Mississippi. Laura stared at Vanessa with her mouth slightly agape. This was the first time in 3 years that Vanessa had taken off her veil in front of others. Laura was gratified, but at the same time, she was worried that she would be in danger if someone recognized her identity. Abraham was also slightly taken aback, but soon revealed a gratified smile. All these years, His Majesty had spent a lot of effort to help this lass walk out of her feelings of inferiority. He did not expect that after coming here, she would take off her veil on her own. This could be considered a good thing. Vanessa pursed her lips and smiled, not revealing her teeth. She put down the hand under the table and grabbed the hem of her shirt, feeling a little strange. Here, she felt relaxed and happy. She had gotten rid of the shackles of her identity as the princess of the Roth Empire, and was just like an ordinary girl. Even if she had some flaws, it did not seem unacceptable, right? Take a look and see what you want to eat. Feel free to order. Abraham opened the menu in front of Vanessa. Uncle, are you treating us today? I. Randy said with a smile. Not including you. Abraham shook his head with a smile. I knew you were a petty fellow. Randy pursed his lips, but he was not angry. He looked at Vanessa, who was looking at the menu seriously, and said, Miss Vanessa, although your beauty has put the flowers to shame, I still suggest you try the savory tofu pudding. There are only 150 servings per meal, and it has become the most sought-after beauty product for women in Chaos City. Oh. Vanessa's eyes lit up. There was a delicacy that could make her beautiful after eating it. Tofu pudding. Of course, you should eat sweet tofu pudding. Abraham was about to say something when he suddenly remembered the king and queen forbade Vanessa from eating sweets. This lass loved sweets the most, and that was why her teeth had become like this. He stopped abruptly, and reluctantly said, Of course, savory tofu pudding is also very good. You can have savory tofu pudding, eh? Uncle, you have turned over a new leaf today and become a savory fan too. Randy looked at Abraham in shock. Usually, when it came to ordering tofu pudding, the two of them would argue. He did not expect Abraham to take the initiative to recommend Miss Vanessa to eat savory tofu pudding today. Vanessa had already found the picture of sweet tofu pudding in the pictures. The golden red gravy was poured over the tender white tofu pudding, and she could taste the sweetness at a glance. Her eyes lit up immediately. This sweet tofu pudding looks delicious. Young mistress, you can't eat sweets anymore. Laura shook her head with worry written all over her little face. The royal doctor had said that if the princess continued to eat sweets, she might lose all her teeth. Vanessa's gaze was already completely captivated. She stuck out a finger and pleaded, I'll just have one bowl. Just one bowl. Abraham and Laura were both hesitant. They could not resist Vanessa's coquettish behavior the most. She was really a little cutie that made people feel conflicted. Tofu pudding is so delicious, and it can make you look good after eating it. Why don't you let Miss Vanessa have one bowl? It's not something that you can eat every day, Randy said with a smile. Although she did not want to eat sweet tofu pudding, seeing how coquettish she was, the taste did not seem to matter anymore. Then, you can only have it once, Abraham said seriously. Since Vanessa had come to Chaos City, he had to be responsible for her. Apart from sending her back to Rhoda safely, he also had to ensure her basic necessities during her stay in Chaos City. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the face to go back and see the king. Vanessa nodded profusely. Then, she smiled at Randy and said, Thank you. Randy was stunned when he saw Vanessa's black and yellow teeth when she smiled. She had an angelic face, but her teeth were like those of an 80-year-old man, or even worse. He was a little shocked. Vanessa saw Randy's expression, and suddenly realized that she was not wearing a veil. She quickly covered her mouth with her little hand, and lowered her head. Laura glared at Randy. This fellow was the same as those fellows. He had hurt the princess again. Abraham sighed in his heart. Randy's expression was just a normal reaction. However, Vanessa's heart was a little fragile. She must have been hurt again. Randy quickly realized his rudeness, and apologetically said, I'm sorry, Miss Vanessa. I didn't mean to offend you. Vanessa lowered her head and remained silent for a while. She loosened her grip on the hem of her dress, and looked up with a forced smile. She shook her head, and said, It's all right. I'm already used to it. Randy was silent. He did not know what to say to comfort her. Vanessa Andre, female, 16 years old. Severe dental caries accompanied by long-term abnormal corrosion. In the kitchen, Meg looked at the young lady sitting opposite Abraham, and narrowed his eyes. Our little princess doesn't seem to have good teeth. Chapter 12:30. The Andre family represented the highest authority in the Roth Empire. Of course, the huge Andre family had countless descendants, but King Andre only had one princess. She happened to be 16 years old this year, and her name was Vanessa. Meg had just finished reading all the information about the Roth Empire today. This princess, who was doted on by the king, rarely appeared in the public eye in recent years. As she wasn't a key character, there wasn't much information about her in the information. It was only said that it could be due to some hidden illness. Now, Meg could confirm what that hidden illness was. It was the dental decay in her eyes. To a beautiful young lady, having dental decay in her eyes that affected her looks was indeed unacceptable. Meg sized up Vanessa for a while. He had to admit that the Andre family's genes were indeed very strong. There was the tall and handsome Sean, the melancholy Josh, and the beautiful Vanessa. Except for the monkey-like third prince who seemed to have grown a little crooked. The king just sent someone to ask me to go to Rodu a few days ago. Why did this princess come to Chaos City by herself? What's the purpose of this trip? A few questions arose in Meg's mind. The peace talks between the various races were about to start, and it was an eventful time. With Princess Vanessa's status, she should be staying in the palace obediently. It wasn't a good idea to come to Chaos City. On the other side, Vanessa and the rest had also ordered their food, and were waiting quietly for it to be served. Because of what happened earlier, the atmosphere between them was a little awkward. Randy wanted to say something to ease the awkwardness. For example, he didn't mind that Miss Vanessa's teeth were rotten, or even if her teeth were rotten, her smile was still beautiful. However, after thinking about it seriously, he chose to remain silent. Those words were obviously hurtful, and wouldn't have any consolation effect. Vanessa's emotions had already calmed down slowly. Compared to those people who laughed behind her back and didn't hide the mockery in their eyes, Randy's performance was already considered very restrained. Besides, he really didn't have any hostility. However, she still felt a little inferior about her rotten teeth. Her appearance would indeed scare others. Abraham was also sitting quietly as he carefully observed Vanessa. This little girl was very active when she was young, and would often pester him to take her out to eat good food. In recent years, she had slowly become quiet and reticent due to her teeth. Furthermore, they would often only see each other once in half a year. If this trip to Chaos City could be resolved, then leaving the palace wouldn't be so bad after all. Here's your eggplant with garlic sauce. The sweet tofu pudding will be served soon. Please enjoy. Yabamiya placed 2 bowls of rice and a plate of eggplant with garlic sauce in front of Vanessa and Laura. Thank you. Vanessa said politely, but her eyes were completely attracted by the fish on the plate in front of her. The fish was split in half, and there were beautiful cuts on its body. The thick golden red sauce covered the fish meat. A rich meaty aroma assaulted her nostrils. Even the meaty aroma she had tasted before could not compare to this aroma. It smells even better than the aroma I smelled in my dreams, Vanessa murmured. Vanessa murmured. She knew that this plate wasn't filled with fish, but an eggplant. However, because of the chef's exquisite knife skills and unique cooking method, this eggplant looked no different from a fish. She had imagined this eggplant with garlic sauce in her dreams many times, but when it was placed in front of her, she realized that her imagination was not enough. Isn't this fish? Laura was also looking at the plate curiously. She had heard the princess mention eggplant with garlic sauce countless times, and it was the reason why she dared to leave the palace. They had crossed half the continent to come to Chaos City for this eggplant with garlic sauce. It was crazy. Try the eggplant with garlic sauce that you have been thinking about day and night, Abraham said with a smile. Vanessa answered, and eagerly picked up a piece of eggplant with her chopsticks and put it into her mouth. The soft eggplant melted in her mouth, and then the four flavors, sour, spicy, sweet, and salty, exploded in her mouth at the same time. Her calm taste buds were activated instantly. It was like a volcano that had been dormant for many years suddenly erupting with lava, stimulating her tongue crazily. Every flavor was so prominent, but when they blended together, they were so harmonious that one could not help but indulge in it. Her taste buds went from resisting to welcoming crazily. After experiencing a crazy taste feast, she swallowed gently, and the lingering aroma lingered in her mouth. Oh! What an incredible taste! Vanessa could not help but praise. Even though she had read Derek's article countless times, and imagined the taste countless times, when she really tasted the eggplant with garlic sauce, she suddenly realized that no words could describe the taste accurately. The excitement and craziness at the tip of her tongue, and the lingering aroma, all showed the unique charm of this vegetarian dish. Vanessa knew that she had been completely won over. The salty and delicious eggplant with garlic sauce paired with a bowl of white rice was a simple combination, but it blossomed into an incredible taste. Vanessa, who had only eaten a few bites of dry rations on the journey, could not stop eating. Is it really that good? Laura looked at the princess, who was usually very picky about food, and could not help but be a little puzzled when she saw how happy and excited the princess was. Laura, you should eat too, Vanessa said to Laura as she looked up from her bowl. I'm not hungry. You can eat first. Laura quickly shook her head. According to the rules, she was not allowed to sit at the same table as the princess, let alone eat together. It's a rare opportunity to taste such delicacies, it would be a pity to miss it. Vanessa pushed another bowl of rice in front of Laura, and said with a smile, this is an order. Eat, it's my treat today anyway, Abraham said with a smile. He knew that Vanessa treated this palace maid who had grown up with her very well, and he did not care who he ate with at the same table. Since both the princess and the duke had spoken, Laura did not dare to refuse even though she was unwilling. She picked up a piece of eggplant with her chopsticks and put it on top of the rice, and then put the eggplant and rice into her mouth together. Laura, who was not looking forward to it, suddenly brightened up. The soft eggplant seemed to have melted on top of the rice, and the sour, spicy, sweet, and salty soup mixed into the fragrant rice. The more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. It's just an eggplant that no one likes. How did it become so delicious? Lola's heart was filled with shock. She had tasted the delicacies cooked by many famous chefs when she was with the princess, but she had to admit that none of them could compare to this. Chapter 1231. Vanessa's joyful expression didn't last long as the deliciousness blossomed in her mouth. The sourness and spiciness irritated her teeth, and the stinging pain forced her to put down the chopsticks in her hand. She covered her mouth and frowned. Vanessa, what's wrong? Abraham asked with concern. His expression also became a little nervous. Was there something wrong with the dish? Oh no. Laura reacted quickly and said anxiously, Miss, are your teeth hurting again? You can't eat anything that's too strong. I'm fine. I just need to drink some water. Vanessa shook her head. The stinging pain would occur from time to time. Eating a light diet was too much for her. Miss, can we have a glass of water? Laura stood up and walked quickly to Yabamiya. She was a little anxious. Okay, please wait a moment. Yabamiya glanced at Vanessa and turned to the kitchen. She explained the guest's request to Meg and then handed a glass of warm water to Laura. Thank you, Laura said gratefully. She quickly returned to her seat and handed the glass of water to Vanessa. Even eating eggplant with garlic sauce gives you a toothache. This dental decay is really serious. Meg was deep in thought. It seemed that the awareness of brushing one's teeth in the morning and evening was really important. Otherwise, even the noble princess would be tortured by dental decay. Among the customers who ate in the restaurant, there was a high proportion of varying degrees of dental decay. Ding! New mission: please treat Vanessa's dental decay within a month and restore her ability to taste delicious food. Mission success: receive a durian pizza recipe. Mission failure: receive the same degree of dental decay as Vanessa's. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. What the fuck? Meg raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but complain in his mind, System, isn't this mission too much? Her father and her two brothers have tried to kill me time and time again, and they still haven't given up on the idea. I'm already merciful enough not to put anything bad in her food, but you actually want me to treat her teeth? Are you stupid, or do you think I'm stupid? Host, you shouldn't let her bear the consequences of other people's mistakes. This is illogical. Moreover, as a kind person who truly loves delicious food, she should be treated well and continue on the path of enjoying delicious food, the system said calmly. Mag looked at Vanessa, who was rinsing her mouth with warm water. He couldn't deny that she was indeed a kind-hearted person from the information he had read. But I'm a chef. As a candidate for the god of cookery, how can I steal a dentist's job? That's very unprofessional. System, where are your professional ethics? Letting the customers eat happily is the purpose of my service. No, your services. Host, please don't deviate from the topic. I can treat her teeth, but you have to give me a set of modern dental equipment. Given her status, the king can invite the best doctors and healing magic casters in the world for her. Since they can't do anything, why do you think a chef like me can do it? Meg pursed his lips. The knowledge in his mind didn't allow him to clean Vanessa's teeth and mend her decayed teeth. The system was silent for a long time before saying, I can sponsor you with a bottle of Crest. Scram! Meg flipped the kebab in his hand and looked at Vanessa, deep in thought. As the only princess of the Roth Empire, if it was just a simple tooth decay, the royal doctors would have already cured it. The real problem was the long-term abnormal corrosion detected by the omniscient door. Letting a chef do the dentist's job. This stupid system is really fickle. Meg shook his head. He really couldn't think of any other way except to give her a bottle of Crest. After rinsing her mouth, Vanessa's pain subsided a lot. However, she was in a dilemma when she looked at the eggplant with garlic sauce. The scrumptious eggplant with garlic sauce was in line with all her imagination, and even exceeded her expectations. However, she couldn't enjoy the wonderful taste. The pain in her teeth made her unable to continue enjoying this delicious food. Randy looked at Vanessa, and could not help but feel sorry for her. He did not have many thoughts about Vanessa, but he was more concerned about this niece of his because he often ate with Abraham during this period of time, and they were more familiar with each other. He still couldn't forget that charming lady boss. Perhaps one day, he would look for her again and eat the noodles she made. Miss Vanessa, why don't you have the soft tofu pudding? Randy put the bowl of savory tofu pudding that he hadn't touched in front of Vanessa with a smile, and said, try the savory one first, and then the sweet one later. You won't be hungry at night. This. Vanessa wanted to reject. Eat it. It's rare that he's so kind as to give the tofu pudding to someone else. It's better for you to eat something soft. Abraham smiled and nodded at Randy. It's your treat, Randy mouthed. Abraham's face darkened, but the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Thank you. Vanessa looked at Randy and smiled again. This time, she didn't hide her mouth. Her black teeth also had some incomplete beauty. Her gaze was quickly attracted by the tofu pudding in front of her. The white and tender tofu pudding was placed in a small bowl with a spoonful of orange-red sauce and some chopped pickled vegetables. The faint fragrance of beans wafted over, and it was refreshing and pleasant. So cute. Vanessa couldn't wait to scoop the tofu pudding with the spoon. The spoon cut the tofu pudding open easily, and the snow-white cut was quickly covered by the orange-red sauce. The tofu pudding swayed slightly in the spoon, showing off its wonderful elasticity. After looking at it for a while, she reluctantly put the tofu pudding into her mouth. Once the tofu pudding entered her mouth, she almost didn't need to chew it, and it melted by itself. The sweet and fragrant tofu pudding, the salty pickled vegetables, and the sauce blended together perfectly. The refreshing taste was given a rich taste by the sauce, but it didn't cover up the bean fragrance. The tofu pudding was like a mischievous elf as it circled around in his mouth, gently licking his injured teeth. His aching teeth felt a lot more comfortable, and it slid down his throat with a sizzle. The faint bean fragrance lingered in her mouth, and it was full of a refreshing feeling. So delicious. What a wonderful tofu pudding. Vanessa was pleasantly surprised. The pain in her teeth had mostly subsided. Eating this tofu pudding didn't hurt her teeth, and it seemed to have the effect of reducing the pain. Vanessa couldn't stop eating the refreshing and savory tofu pudding. She ate one mouthful after another, and the bowl was soon empty. Your sweet tofu pudding. Yabamiya gently placed a sweet tofu pudding in front of Vanessa. Double monthly votes activated. Monthly votes please. Chapter 1232. Vanessa had just tasted the savory tofu pudding, and she couldn't resist the sweet tofu pudding in front of her. The golden red syrup drizzled onto the tofu pudding, and it was as if the tofu pudding was wrapped in a beautiful layer of sugar, making it look so tempting. The sweet aroma had already drifted over, and with the syrup's addition, even the fragrance of the beans seemed to have become more intense. The three people at the table all looked at Vanessa at the same time. She had just given up on the eggplant with garlic sauce that she couldn't get out of her head due to her toothache. If she were to eat the sweet tofu pudding now, it would be no different from adding fuel to the fire. Vanessa was clearly aware of that, too, so she looked at the sweet tofu pudding with a conflicted expression on her face. Her rationality told her that she had to follow the doctor's instructions and stop eating the tofu pudding. However, the gluttony in her stomach kept tempting her to have another bite, even if it was just a small bite. I'll just have one bite. In the end, her gluttony won over her rationality, and she picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of the sweet tofu pudding into her mouth. The sweetness instantly blossomed in her mouth. The refreshing sweetness wasn't sticky at all, and the bean fragrance was completely stimulated by the sweetness. It was a delightful and exciting taste. It's delicious. Vanessa loved this taste. The perfect amount of sweetness gave the tofu pudding a completely different flavor, and it wasn't inferior to the savory tofu pudding in any way. It was like the most delicious piece of candy, and she couldn't bear to swallow it just like that. However, before she could savor it carefully, it slid down her throat and down her throat. She closed her eyes and savored the lingering aftertaste in her mouth. Vanessa opened her eyes and scooped up another spoonful of tofu pudding. Young mistress, didn't you say you'd just have one bite? Laura reminded her carefully. The princess couldn't stop eating sweets, but she really couldn't continue eating sweets. Otherwise, her toothache would worsen. I want to stop, too, but my body won't allow it. Vanessa said with a resigned expression as she shoved the tofu pudding into her mouth again. She had eaten many candies before. The candies that came from all over the Norland continent would all be sent to her palace for her to choose from. Only those that she didn't want would be distributed to the other palaces. However, there had never been anything that could compare to this sweet tofu pudding. The syrup and the tofu pudding seemed to be one whole entity, and they were like the most exquisite and delicious candy with the most incredible texture. This girl. Abraham looked at Vanessa, who was completely immersed in the sweet tofu pudding. He couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. The way she ate really hadn't changed at all from when she was young. As long as she saw good food, she could always immerse herself in it. However, from today onwards, she could only eat savory tofu pudding. There was only one bowl of sweet tofu pudding. Vanessa put down the empty bowl in her hand, and couldn't help but praise, "I think Mr. Mac is really the best chef in the world. Only he can make such incredible and delicious food." Randy nodded in agreement with Vanessa's words. "In my 28 years of life, Mr. Mac is indeed the best chef I've ever met. Not only is his culinary skills superb, but his crazy creative spirit is also unmatched. Every new dish he makes subverts my knowledge and imagination. That's why I've decided to settle down in Chaos City. As long as I stay at Amy's, I'll be able to taste new delicacies frequently. There's no other restaurant like this on the Norland continent," Abraham said with a smile. He was very proud of his unique taste. "I've decided. I'm going to settle down in Chaos City too," Vanessa said with a serious expression. "Oh, my little ancestor, you can't do that. I'll have to send you back in a few days." Abraham quickly shook his head. He was still having a headache about how to write a letter to the king at night. If this lass were to settle down in Chaos City, he wouldn't be as carefree as before. "Laura, eat this eggplant with garlic sauce," Vanessa said to Laura. She picked up the remaining half bowl of rice, and ate it pitifully. She couldn't eat eggplant with garlic sauce, so she had to eat some rice. Luckily, this rice was very delicious without any side dishes. The more she chewed, the more delicious it was. Laura nodded. The princess really couldn't eat eggplant with garlic sauce anymore, so she had to finish the rest. Although she felt sorry for the princess, the eggplant with garlic sauce was really delicious. Vanessa ordered another bowl of rice for her. The four of them finished their dinner one after another. Abraham paid the bill, and was about to leave with Vanessa. He thought for a moment, and gestured for Vanessa to wait while he walked straight to the kitchen. Abraham stopped at the kitchen door, and looked at Meg. "Mr. Mac, do you have time to talk to me?" Meg turned off the fire, and scooped the fried rice into a bowl for Barbara. He then turned to Abraham, and said, "What do you want to talk to me about, Duke?" Abraham lowered his voice, and said, "I have a niece who really likes to eat your food, but her teeth aren't very good. She can't eat spicy food, and can't chew through things that are too hard. Next time we come to eat, can you add less spicy seasoning to her portion, or cook it a little softer?" "I see." Meg pondered. He looked at Abraham, and said, "I know a little about dental care. Why don't you bring her here after the restaurant closes tonight, and I'll take a look at her. Mr. Mac, you know how to treat dental problems." Abraham looked at Meg in surprise. "I've always insisted on making sure my customers eat healthily," Meg said calmly. Abraham thought about it again. Whether it was the beautifying effect of the tofu pudding, or the anti-hair loss effect of the Buddha jumps over the wall, Meg had shown abilities that ordinary doctors and healing magicians couldn't reach. Maybe he really had a way to relieve or even treat Vanessa's toothache. "Okay, then I'll bring her here after the restaurant closes." Abraham nodded, and turned to leave. "System, I don't want crest anymore. Make me a Yunnan Baiyao, the better kind, and a soft toothbrush," Meg said in his mind. Sponsorship exchange successful. Making long-lasting Chinese medicine toothpaste. Also, check her teeth. Even if you don't help treat her, you have to at least help me determine her condition, Meg continued. Professional oral examination fee, 555 copper coins per session. Ha! Meg rolled his eyes. This guy really didn't forget to make money at all times. He curled his lips and said, "Go ahead." For the sake of his teeth, he had to treat Vanessa's teeth. He didn't want to become strangers because of a mouthful of rotten teeth and delicious food. Saliva, foreign matter attached to teeth, blood extraction successful. X-ray lens completed. Analyzing results. Chapter 1233. Are you going to look for Mr. Mac tonight? Vanessa was a little surprised to hear Abraham's words in the horse-drawn carriage. Yes. Mr. Mac said he has some insights into oral care, so he agreed to take a look at you. Abraham nodded. He was also a little suspicious of Mr. Mac's unprofessional behavior. But he's a chef, so he might not be able to give you any good advice. He can make such delicious food. I believe in him, Vanessa said with a smile. Although she had only eaten a few mouthfuls of the eggplant with garlic sauce that she had been longing for, the 2 servings of tofu pudding were still enough to satisfy her. She now had a clear understanding of Mr. Mac's culinary skills. A gourmet who could overturn the impossible, with amazing creativity and imagination, was the perfect gift that God had given to a foodie. She had to admit that she had been captured. That full menu was like a treasure, waiting for her to slowly unearth it so that she could enjoy the joy and enjoyment brought by the delicious food. Tell me, what do you want me to say to His Majesty so that you can stay in Chaos City for a few more days? Abraham asked as he looked at Vanessa dotingly. Abraham had 3 sons, but none of them had a son, so he had doted on Vanessa since she was young, and often brought her out of the palace to play. In the past few years, he had seen Vanessa's gloomy personality, quiet personality, and lack of smile on her face, which made his heart ache. He didn't expect that this lass would become a completely different person after coming to Chaos City. Not only did she become more talkative, but she also had a smile on her face again. She had become a lot more cheerful all of a sudden, which surprised him. Vanessa thought seriously for a while, and said, "Just tell him that I'm having a lot of fun here, and I plan to stay for a while longer. After that, I'll go back obediently. I'll be with you, Uncle, so you don't have to worry about my safety at all." "You know very well what your father is worried about," Abraham said with a smile. It was similar to what he had in mind. He would send a letter back to Rodu so that the king and queen wouldn't have to worry. The horse-drawn carriage drove toward Abraham's mansion in the city. A black shadow appeared on a roof beside the street, and looked in the direction of the horse-drawn carriage before disappearing without a trace. The results of the system's inspection quickly appeared. Compared to the general description of the omniscient door, the results of the system's inspection were more professional. Saliva is abnormally acidic and corrosive to tooth enamel. The tooth exhibits an acidic substance deposit that is highly corrosive. There are also a variety of abnormal bacteria. It was accompanied by severe periodontitis, bleeding and swelling of the gums. The oral mucosa is severely damaged. There are bleeding spots. The tooth structure is severely damaged, the tooth enamel is severely corroded, and the ability to chew is impaired. Blood analysis results. The blood is obviously acidic. Meg looked at the report in his mind and was secretly speechless. It seemed that the little princess's dental problems were not simply caused by eating sugar. After all, eating too much sugar would cause diabetes, but he had never heard that it would cause the blood and saliva to become acidic. Furthermore, the omniscient door did not indicate that she had gastric problems, so the possibility of gastric acid reflux could be ruled out. As a person without any medical knowledge, this report did not provide much help to Meg other than making him aware of the thorny problem. If sour doesn't work, then add some alkali to neutralize it. Meg began to use scientific thinking to solve the problem. Host, the system needs to remind you that the acidity of the blood will not be affected by the food intake. It is a completely different concept from neutralizing gastric acid, the system's voice sounded. Then why don't you give her an infusion? Why don't you give her some special medicine? Why did you give me such a lousy task and ask me, a chef, to treat her tooth decay? Is there any justice in this world? Did you steal the task from the system next door and give it to me? Meg rolled his eyes, feeling a little unhappy. Host, please correct your attitude and actively treat her tooth, the system said weakly, and then its voice disappeared completely. At the same time, a notification appeared in the corner. Yunnan Baiyao long-acting toothpaste has been delivered to the third compartment of the counter. 3 toothbrushes with soft bristles are included. Feeling guilty? Meg raised his eyebrows. Although he was used to the system's unreliability, he was afraid that he would have to slowly think of a way to treat Princess Vanessa's tooth disease. After the dinner service, everyone finished cleaning up and returned to the dormitory. Connie didn't come back after delivering the food. After all, the deputy warden of the Bawtai prison was her master, so Meg didn't bother to worry about her. After all, her job was to deliver food every day. He wanted to give Connie more time to cultivate, but he didn't know if there would be enough time. It wasn't a good thing for the orcs to be too united. Meg had just taken off his apron and chef's hat when there was a knock on the door. Isn't it time to rest? Amy looked curiously in the direction of the door. Maybe there's something else. Meg opened the door. Abraham, Vanessa, and the little maid were standing at the door. Mr. Mac, sorry to disturb you, Abraham said with a smile. Hello, Mr. Mac, I'm Vanessa. Vanessa smiled and looked at Meg with admiration. Mr. Meg was indeed full of charm up close. Meg looked at Vanessa. Her delicate face could indeed be called a little beauty. Her incomplete black teeth were a little out of place, but they couldn't hide her beauty. He smiled and said, I'm Meg. Miss Vanessa's smile is very beautiful. Vanessa was slightly stunned. Looking at Meg's gentle smile and sincere gaze, her heart trembled slightly. She was sure that he wasn't lying. What a wonderful feeling. She hadn't heard anyone praise her smile for a long time. Even if she did, it was just a lie because of her identity. People hated her teeth, hated her smile, and talked about her behind her back. But Meg praised him. Compared to Mr. Mac, Randy is really a little brother. Abraham sighed in his heart. At the same time, he raised Meg's vigilance to the highest level. If this guy wanted to, he could hook his finger, and the princess would be hooked. That wouldn't do. Laura also looked at Meg with vigilance. She still had some resentment towards this guy who refused the king's invitation and caused the princess to leave the palace and come all the way here. Although the food he made was delicious, he didn't look like a good person from the way he talked to the princess. He must have some ulterior motives. Please come in. Meg held the door with one hand and stepped aside to let Vanessa and the others in. Father, did you change to a new beautiful sister tonight? Amy looked at Vanessa, who came in with a thoughtful expression. The last day, please vote. Chapter 1234. Hello. Vanessa came in and smiled at Amy and Anna, who were holding a fat orange cat. The 2 little elves were so cute and obedient, and the fat orange cat was also very adorable. Hello, big sister. Amy nodded. Although this big sister's teeth looked a little strange, they were still very beautiful. Hello. Anna nodded slightly and also looked at Vanessa curiously. Meg closed the door and gestured for Vanessa to sit down. He then stood in front of her and smiled. I'm not a doctor, so I might not be able to give you much help. I'll have to take a look at your teeth to confirm the specific situation. Okay. Vanessa nodded. She felt an inexplicable sense of trust when she looked at Meg. She didn't feel too much pressure even when she showed him her ugliest side. Instead, she was looking forward to him being able to help her. Although he was only a chef, she had high hopes for him. Come, open your mouth, Meg said gently. Vanessa opened her mouth and revealed her teeth. Meg looked at Vanessa's teeth. He had already received the inspection report from the system, and this step was only to rationalize his actions. Although he had already expected this, Meg was still shocked when he saw Vanessa's complete set of teeth. Her teeth were supposed to be flat and white, but now they looked like they had been corroded by sulfuric acid. There were countless holes of various sizes, and there was a layer of black dirt on the surface of the teeth. They looked extremely stubborn. The most serious molars had been completely corroded, and only the roots of the teeth were left. It was difficult to imagine that these were the teeth of a 16-year-old girl. Is there any other way? Vanessa looked at Meg and asked. Laura looked at Meg nervously. If he could cure her teeth, then he would be a good man. Abraham also looked at Meg expectantly. The king had once summoned all the best doctors in the world and all the healing magicians in the Magus Tower, but none of them could cure Vanessa's teeth. There were even rumors that she was cursed by the gods, which was why she had a mouth of rotten teeth. These rumors were obviously extremely cruel to a young girl in her prime. It's hard to say. Meg shook his head. Vanessa's eyes dimmed. She had heard the same thing from countless doctors and mages. But we still have to try, don't we? Meg said with a smile. Vanessa looked at Meg's smile and felt warmth in her heart. Hope rose in her heart again and she nodded slightly. Meg straightened up and said, for oral problems, the most important thing is to clean and take care of them in a timely manner. Now, we have to make sure that your teeth won't continue to deteriorate and eliminate the problem. After that, we can slowly repair your teeth and restore them to their normal appearance. Miss always rinses her mouth after eating. She pays a lot of attention to the cleanliness of her mouth. Laura said. Did this guy think that Princess Heart's teeth were damaged because she didn't pay attention to hygiene? Meg shook his head slightly and said, I know. But if you only use sea salt to clean your teeth and rinse your mouth, it won't be enough. Especially for Miss Vanessa's current situation. Then how should I clean my teeth? Vanessa asked. Meg walked to the counter and took out the Yunnan Baiyao special long-lasting toothpaste and 3 toothbrushes sponsored by the system. He showed it to Vanessa and said, This is the toothpaste I made myself. Every day before you wake up and go to bed, use it to brush your teeth. Toothpaste. Vanessa looked at Meg in confusion. This was the first time she had heard of such a thing. Moreover, it was made by Meg himself and stored in a flat, round container. Because it looks like an ointment and is used to clean your teeth, I named it toothpaste. Meg explained. Then, he unscrewed the lid and tore open the sealed layer inside. He gestured, This is a soft bristle toothbrush. Press the bottom of the toothpaste and squeeze out a pea-sized amount of toothpaste onto the toothbrush. Rinse your mouth once, then hold the toothbrush in your mouth and gently brush your teeth up and down for 3 minutes. After that, spit out the foam and rinse your mouth with water. Brush your teeth in one go. Vanessa looked at Meg in confusion. I've drawn a manual for the specific process for you. When you go back, just follow the manual. Meg passed a folded piece of paper to Vanessa. Okay. Vanessa took the manual with both hands. Brushing your teeth is very important. Remember to do it every day before you go to bed and after you wake up. If you run out of toothpaste, come to me. A soft bristle toothbrush can be used for a month. After a month, change to a new toothbrush. Meg reminded her again. Okay. Vanessa nodded. Her heart was filled with warmth. It had been a long time since someone had gently reminded her of such trivial matters. Moreover, it was a stranger she had just met. Perhaps to Meg, she was just a stranger. However, to her, he and the eggplant with garlic sauce had appeared in her dreams many times. Although she could not see his face clearly every time, there was a special sense of familiarity. Also, the tooth disease has already invaded your gums. If you eat anything too stimulating, it will cause secondary damage to your gums and teeth. It's not good for the recovery of your teeth. Therefore, from today onwards, you can't eat sugar or spicy or stimulating food. Especially before you go to bed at night, you are forbidden from eating anything other than water, Meg said seriously. At that moment, he felt that he was quite suitable to be a doctor. Then, the sweet tofu pudding. Vanessa said weakly. No. Meg shook his head. He took the menu from the side and flipped it open. Then, he said, it's not just the sweet tofu pudding. Black pepper steak, spicy grilled fish, roast beef kebabs, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. You can't eat any of these dishes before your teeth recover. Vanessa looked at the few dishes left on the menu and pouted. However, she also knew that Meg was doing this for her own good. Although she was very unwilling, she still nodded obediently. He seems to be quite professional. He's even more detailed than those doctors. Those doctors only told the princess to eat less sugar, but if she doesn't eat sugar, her teeth will still deteriorate. Laura looked at Meg in surprise. She just did not know if the princess would be able to hold back this time. All right, go back and rest early. Meg put the toothpaste and toothbrush into a small wooden box and handed it to Laura, who was standing at the side. Thank you, Mr. Mack. Vanessa stood up and looked at Meg gratefully. Treating teeth is a long-term thing. I believe that you can persevere. Meg smiled. I will. Vanessa nodded. When they walked out of the door, Abraham purposely stayed a few steps behind and grabbed Meg's hand. He said seriously, Mr. Mack, if Vanessa's teeth can be cured, I will definitely thank you greatly. Duke, you are too kind. Meg smiled. If Vanessa's teeth could not be cured, he would be the one with a headache. Chapter 12:35. Has that big sister left? Amy asked curiously as she watched Meg close the door. She's just here to get some toothpaste. Meg nodded. No one knew what this little fellow was thinking about. He smiled and said, let's go upstairs and wash up. I'll tell you two a bedtime story. All right. Amy and Anna's eyes lit up, and they followed Meg upstairs obediently. On the other side, Vanessa and the rest had also returned to the manor that Abraham had bought in Chaos City. As soon as they entered the house and sat down, Vanessa took out the crystal jar that contained all kinds of candies. She opened the lid, and pinched a beautiful blue candy between her slender fingers. Moss, Laura was about to remind her when she saw that. Vanessa's hand was still in the jar when she stopped. She looked at the beautiful candy in the crystal jar, and hesitated for a moment before letting go of the candy between her fingers. Then, she slammed the lid shut, and shook her head. No, Mr. Mack said that I can't eat candies anymore. I've already made a promise with him. You've stopped yourself. Laura was a little surprised. Usually, no matter how she tried to persuade the princess, she would only stop after eating a few candies. She didn't expect that she would actually stop herself today, just because of the promise with Mr. Mack. Laura, take this candy jar outside and bury it in the garden. Bury it somewhere I can't see. I don't need it anymore. Vanessa turned to Laura, and passed the candy jar to her. Princess, His Majesty gave this to you on your 10th birthday. Are you really going to bury it? Laura was a little hesitant. This exquisite candy jar was carved by the best sculptor in the Roth Empire using a whole piece of top-grade crystal. It took him a year to carve it, and there was no other candy jar in the world that was more beautiful than it. Bury it. I don't need it anymore, Vanessa said firmly. She glanced at the candy jar in her hand. Otherwise, I'll want to eat candy every time I see it. All right. Lola carefully took the sugar jar. She also knew that the princess must have made a great decision to make such a decision. Moreover, her teeth were indeed much more important than the sugar jar. If the princess's teeth could recover, His Majesty would definitely be very happy. Laura went out with the candy jar, while Vanessa took out the manual that Meg had given her. The manual was written in a graphic format, and it explained the techniques and requirements of brushing teeth. Mr. Mac is such a considerate person. Vanessa's lips curled into a smile, and his smile appeared in her heart again. Also, the drawing is really beautiful, and the words are also beautifully written. Laura came back after a while. Vanessa picked up the toothpaste and a toothbrush and said, "Let's go wash up. I want to brush my teeth." It was the first time Vanessa brushed her teeth with a toothbrush and toothpaste, and it was a very novel experience for her. She thought that the white ointment would be very uncomfortable in her mouth, and that the hair-covered toothbrush might also cause a toothache. To her surprise, the toothpaste was very refreshing when it entered her mouth. The soft brush gently brushed her teeth and gums, and it was like a gentle little hand gently rubbing her teeth and gums. The cool feeling seeped into her gums, and the dull pain in her teeth seemed to be soothed, and then nourished. The small toothpaste turned into a rich foam after being brushed by the soft brush, and it filled her mouth and the gaps between her teeth. "It's so comfortable." Vanessa brushed her teeth in all directions according to the manual. Every night, her teeth would start to ache, and she had to use candy to trick them, but they were completely soothed. The soft brush licked her teeth and gums, and it brought her a very pleasant feeling. 3 minutes passed before she knew it. Vanessa spat out the foam in her mouth. The white foam was mixed with traces of blood and some small black spots. Vanessa was used to bleeding teeth, but it was the first time she saw those small black spots. Could it be that the black stuff on the surface of her teeth had been washed off? Vanessa rinsed her mouth with water and took a deep breath. Her mouth felt unprecedentedly refreshed, and there was a faint fragrance of jasmine. Her teeth also seemed to have undergone a deep cleaning, and the swollen gums and painful roots of her teeth were greatly relieved. A refreshing feeling surrounded her teeth. "Princess, is it effective?" Laura asked carefully. "Yes. After brushing my teeth, my mouth feels exceptionally refreshed. Even my teeth don't hurt anymore." Vanessa nodded. The painkillers that the doctor prescribed for her in the past were far less effective than this toothpaste. "Really?" Laura was pleasantly surprised. She knew very well how painful the princess looked when she had a toothache. She didn't expect that the pain would disappear after brushing her teeth with this toothpaste. This effect was too miraculous. "Mr. Mac is really amazing." Vanessa sighed. Laura nodded. She would be good to anyone who was good to the princess. The Wind Forest, Starry Cave Abode. Helena stood on the platform, and looked down at Sally as she asked, "Do you know which star in this starry sky is yours?" "I don't know." Sally looked up at the starry sky at the top of the cave. She shook her head slightly as she looked at the brightest star. "If this star is destroyed, you will become the brightest new star," Helena said as she pointed at the brightest star. "If that happens, the entire starry sky will be overshadowed." Sally frowned. "Even if the light is a little dimmer, it's still better than the entire starry sky being destroyed by a shooting star." Helena's voice was slightly cold. Her gaze fell on the star in the center that was enshrouded in mist. Sally was silent. "Tomorrow, I will lead the army south to exterminate the night elves. You will follow me and kill her with your own hands. Then, you will be the new elven princess." Helena lowered her head and looked at Sally. Sally pursed her lips and clenched her fists subconsciously. "Your family and the entire elven race need you to do this." Helena's voice gradually turned cold. Remember, I have more choices. Yes. Sally was silent for a long time before she finally nodded. Sir, there is an urgent report from the forest. High Priestess Helena will lead the army south tomorrow. She is expected to arrive in 2 days and launch an all-out attack on the underground cavern. A young general walked quickly into the tent and reported respectfully to Borg, who was discussing a strategy with a few other generals. Sir Borg, I'm afraid High Priestess Helena wants to take the credit this time. Should we take down the underground cavern before she arrives? The queen is in seclusion, and the princess is openly rebelling. Now, many families in the Wind Forest are still waiting to see which side to follow. If the High Priestess gains a greater reputation in quelling the rebellion, I'm afraid those families will lean towards her. The generals in the tent spoke one after another. Those slaves are indeed useless, but do you think Irina is also a pushover? I'll wait for Helena to come and fight to the death with her. Then, we'll be the fishermen. Borg sneered. The hideous black lines could be vaguely seen. Helena will lead the army south today and arrive at the underground cavern in 2 days. The next morning, Meg received a secret letter from the Grey Temple. Chapter 1236. The shorter the content, the more serious the matter was. This was a very practical experience. Meg looked at the short secret letter in his hand, and once again confirmed the seriousness of the matter. Helena's decision to go south was already set. Now, they had a precise time. 2 days later, the Allied forces in the Wind Forest would converge, and they would definitely launch an all-out attack on the underground caverns. With the overall strength of the Night Elves, they would definitely not be able to resist the Allied forces. Irina would not be able to do it alone, and the Night Elves would face extinction. Meg pondered silently for a while, and then burned the secret letter into ashes. It seemed like he would have to make a trip to the north soon. However, he did not know what Chaos City would think of this news, and whether they would do something else. That spy only sent him a letter today, and did not mention anything else. He only told him to go to the city lord's castle later. Father, the students are going to have their holidays soon. Can I sign up for the end-of-term literary and artistic gala? Amy and Anna had already woken up and come downstairs. Mag was still thinking when Amy and Anna came downstairs. Amy rubbed her sleepy eyes. Join the literary and artistic gala. Meg was a little surprised, but he quickly nodded with a smile. Of course. If Amy wants to join, then sign up. In the past, Amy did not dare to talk to strangers. Now, the little one was getting bolder and bolder. She even took the initiative to ask to join the literary and artistic gala. This was not a small improvement. Then, can I let big sister Anna perform with me? Amy asked expectantly as she held Anna's little hand. This. Meg looked at Anna, who was also looking forward to it. He nodded with a smile, and said, Then, I will go and look for Teacher Luna later. I think she will agree. That's great. Father, I love you. Amy pounced over happily, and Meg picked her up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his cheek. Meg kissed Amy on the forehead and put her down with a smile. Then he turned around and went into the kitchen. All right, you guys go and play. Father is going to start making breakfast for the cleaners. Of course, he could not sit idly by and do nothing about the Night Elves. However, if he were to defend the catacombs to the death, even if he managed to survive the encirclement this time, he would definitely be encircled again and again. With his limited manpower, it would be very difficult to shake the foundation of the Wind Forest's rule in a short period of time. It would depend on Irina's comprehension on how to rapidly expand the Night Elves team and truly shake the foundation of the Wind Forest's rule. He had already asked Phyllis to bring the theory to her. Whether she could understand it and put it into practice depended on Irina. Comrades, please allow me to address you as such, because we are a group of like-minded elves, gathered together for the same goal. In a large stone hall in the catacombs, Irina stood in the middle, while the other elves sat around her with her as the center. They looked at Irina with sparkling eyes full of trust and hope. We rose up to fight for freedom and started this dark night revolution, but those oppressors smeared us as rebels, trying to smear our revolution by stigmatizing us. They also used a large number of troops to encircle and annihilate us in the cradle. But we will never give up. The spark of the revolution will never be extinguished. Irina clenched her fist and raised it above her head as she said firmly. The spark of the revolution will never be extinguished. All the elves clenched their fists and shouted in unison. Their emotions were stirred up for a moment. Irina's gaze swept across the faces of all the elves. Many of them were injured. In the past few days of fighting, they still suffered many casualties despite having the terrain advantage. However, there was no fear or dejection on their faces at this moment. We have broken through the enemy's 3 rounds of encirclement, but the 4th round of encirclement will come soon. Also, there is accurate news from the Wind Forest that Helena has already led her troops south and will join forces with Borg to carry out the final encirclement and annihilation of the Night Elves, Irina said calmly. The cave gradually quieted down. The elves did not appear to be very fearful, but the atmosphere was a little gloomy and pessimistic. Borg's army alone was enough to make the Night Elves exhausted. If High Priestess Helena led her troops to join the encirclement and annihilation, none of them would be able to leave the catacombs alive. I want some of you to leave through the secret passage in the catacombs and return to the Wind Forest and the villages around the forest. Then, you can tell more elves what we are doing. We are fighting for the freedom of the elven race. We want to build a free and peaceful elven nation without oppression and hierarchy. This is a difficult decision, but in order to preserve the seeds of revolution, we have to do this, Irina said in a low voice. All the elves were shocked to hear that. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. What about you, Your Highness? Are you going to leave with us too? Shirley stood up and looked at Irina. All the elves also looked at Irina. No, I want to stay and continue fighting. Irina shook her head, and said with a determined gaze, the Night Elves cannot avoid this battle. Otherwise, it will completely become an excuse for those rulers to oppress the weak even more. We have to show a strong will. Even if we can't win, we have to bite off a piece of meat from them. Tell our people that as long as we unite, their rule is not unshakable. Shirley looked at Irina, and her eyes lit up. She raised the magic caster's staff in her hand, and shouted, I will follow you into battle. We will follow you into battle. All the elves stood up and raised the weapons and magic caster's staffs in their hands. They shouted with flames dancing in their eyes. Irina looked at everyone, and her heart was filled with gratitude. However, she shook her head, and said, this is a battle that is destined to be difficult to win. What we have to do is to show the oppressors the courage of the Night Elves, but most importantly, we have to preserve the seeds of revolution. We have to scatter the seeds among the people and turn them into sparks. One day, these sparks will be able to burn down the entire Wind Forest. All the elves were deep in thought. Let the little ones contribute to the sparks. We old things will turn into dry firewood and follow you to burn one last time in this battle. I hope that the future of the Wind Forest will be as we wish, and become a free elven nation. An elderly elf stood up with a smile. That's right. The racial war back then didn't bring about a better the Wind Forest, so let us old things fight one last time and kick off this battle for freedom. Another elderly elf stood up. More and more elderly elves stood up. Suffering and long years had left many traces on their faces, but they still had warm smiles on their faces. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1237. Mr. Mac, what do you think? In the secret chamber of the City Lord's castle, Michael and Roland were looking at Meg. Meg looked at the map in front of him and fell into deep thought. He came to the City Lord's castle after completing the restaurant's business in the morning, and Michael and Roland were looking for him to discuss the matter of Helena leading her army down south to encircle and annihilate the Night Elves. This is a war without any suspense. The Wind Forest has the absolute advantage in terms of military strength and powerhouses, and can easily crush the Night Elves. No matter how complicated the underground cavern is, it won't be able to withstand the bombardment of thousands of magic casters casting spells at the same time. Meg retracted his gaze from the map, and looked up at Michael and Roland. But if the Night Elves are annihilated, most of the internal conflicts in the Wind Forest will be eliminated, and they will very likely follow the Roth Empire and vote against the peace talks. This is not good news for Chaos City. Irina and the Night Elves have already shown great resilience by being able to force the Wind Forest to deploy such a large number of troops. Michael shook his head. But just like what you said, this is a war without any suspense. This also means that if any faction wants to intervene, they will have to go all out. This means that this faction will definitely have a conflict with the Wind Forest, or even start a full-scale war. This is a consequence that Chaos City and the goblins don't want to bear. Meg was silent. Michael's words made sense. Even the goblins who were stationed at the border weren't willing to fight a war with the Wind Forest now. Right now, no one on the Norland continent would help the Night Elves. Even if the Night Elves are suppressed, the conflict between Borg and Helena is getting worse by the day, and their followers are evenly matched. Without any news from the Elven Queen, the two of them will definitely fight for the control of the Wind Forest day by day. It will be easier to instigate a conflict between them than to support the Night Elves, Roland said. Meg frowned, and said, no matter which of the two gains the right to rule the Wind Forest in the end, it's not a good thing for most elves. Compared to the chaotic world, this is actually a good result, Roland said calmly. Meg didn't refute Roland's words. He had read a lot of information about the racial war. It was a disaster that swept across the entire continent, and nobody wanted to repeat it. What if Alex makes a move? With his previous attitude and his relationship with Irina, he definitely won't sit by and watch the Night Elves be destroyed, Meg said after a moment of silence. For a war, one person can't change the outcome, even if he is Alex. Roland shook his head. There are over a dozen 10th-tier powerhouses in the Elven race, and Borg and Helena are among the top 10th-tier powerhouses. They're currently rushing to the underground caverns. This lineup is much stronger than the lineup of assassins that was put together on that rainy night. If Irina is willing to leave, nobody can make her stay. However, I'm afraid the Night Elves won't be able to survive. Michael also sighed. The Night Elves' philosophy is somewhat similar to our Chaos Cities. If they're given more time, they might become the next Chaos City. So, Chaos City is not planning to do anything. Meg asked Roland and Michael. Chaos City can't do anything about this. Roland nodded. I know those two ladies are with the Night Elves now, but I'm afraid we can't do anything about this, Michael said apologetically. He and Roland admired Meg's foresight and structure, and his talent in manufacturing was even more amazing. However, there were many times where compromise was needed in this world. I know. Meg nodded, and didn't blame them too much. As the rulers of Chaos City, Michael and Roland had to be responsible for the residents of Chaos City. If the Night Elves can survive this siege, we will provide them with some help to a certain extent, Michael added. Meg came out of the City Lord's castle with a heavy heart. Chaos City had made it clear that they wouldn't do anything, so the goblins who were allied with Chaos City obviously wouldn't take the risk of starting a war with the elves for the Night Elves. Meg rode his bicycle to Chaos School, and talked to teacher Luna about Amy wanting to perform with Anna at the end-of-term performance. Luna nodded with a smile after hearing Meg's intention. Sure. Anna is going to school next year too. It's good for her to experience the school atmosphere first. Thank you, teacher Luna. You're welcome, Mr. Meg. I believe the children would love to see Amy and Anna's performance, Luna said with a smile. After returning from school, Meg sat in front of the map for half an hour, and finally fixed his gaze on the boundless sea realm. Since no other force in this world was willing to help the Night Elves, then L'Atlantis, which didn't belong to any force on the map, helped them. Meg's gaze became determined. Although he wanted to hide this trump card for a while longer, if the Night Elves were annihilated and Irina died, then all of this would be meaningless. During lunch, Meg finished his lunch with everyone quietly. He put down his chopsticks, got up, and gestured for Yabamiya, who was about to clear the table, to sit down first. He looked at everyone and said, I have something to discuss with all of you. Boss, what's the matter? Is the hot pot restaurant going to open today? Mia asked curiously. She didn't hear any renovations next door, so the hot pot restaurant shouldn't be opening so soon, right? Everyone else also looked at Meg, and gradually stopped smiling when they saw his serious expression. Shirley and Phyllis went to the underground cavern at the border between the elf tribe and the wind forest, and joined the Night Elves. Everyone knows about this, right? Meg said softly. Anna looked up at Meg immediately. They have been gone for many days. I wonder if they are doing well over there. It shouldn't be very comfortable living in the underground cavern, right? Barbara nodded. She had a good relationship with Phyllis. The Night Elves and the Elf tribe should be at war all the time, right? Or are they still under siege? Elizabeth said with a frown. Although she didn't have much contact with the outside world during this period, she still heard some bad news. Gina widened her eyes as she listened to everyone's conversation. She could only understand half of it now. I heard a piece of news when I went out today. The Night Elves are still surrounded by enemies that outnumber them by a few times. Moreover, there is a huge troop heading towards them, preparing to completely annihilate the Night Elves. They don't have any reinforcements, and they don't have enough powerhouses. Meg looked at everyone with a determined gaze, and said, maybe our mamies should do something. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1238. Defeat the big bad guy and save Sister Shirley and Sister Bean Sprout. Amy raised her little hand and shouted. Count me in. Yabamiya also raised her hand and said with a determined gaze, although I'm still very weak now, as long as Shirley and Phyllis need me, I'll definitely go. Sounds interesting. Count me in, Barbara said with great interest. After coming to this world, the only time she went on a long journey was to send Gina home at the boundless sea realm. She was quite interested in the war in this world. After all, the Moon Nation had never been at war. I'll go too. Gina also raised her hand. Although she didn't quite understand what Meg meant, she knew that Phyllis was in danger and needed help. She definitely couldn't stay out of it. Although I don't know who those two are, you can count me in if you need me. Connie raised his hand and said proudly, I can run very fast now. Can I go? Anna asked carefully. She wanted to go, but she also knew that she might become a burden. Meg looked at everyone and felt gratified. Amy still had some warmth after all. You seem to have no idea what kind of opponent you're going to face. Do you purely think that as long as you go, you can help the Night Elves get out of their predicament and defeat the enemy? Camilla's slightly mocking voice sounded. She looked at the agitated crowd that couldn't wait to set off to the north. Her gaze was filled with helplessness. In order to encircle the night elves, the Wind Forest mobilized more than 10,000 elven guards, including several 10th-tier powerhouses. Recently, Helena even led thousands of troops to join the encirclement force. More than 10 10th-tier powerhouses and 20,000 elite elven guards. Even if you go to the underground cavern, what can you do? Camilla had just received a secret letter from her tribe yesterday, so she was very clear about the situation of the elves and the night elves. The restaurant instantly fell silent. Everyone was calculating how many people there were, and they only had less than 10 people. But what does that have to do with us going to save Sister Shirley and Sister Beansprout? Amy asked curiously. That's right. They can only wait for us. Could it be that we are going to sit back and do nothing just because there are so many of them? Mia also nodded. Although she didn't know how majestic it was to see 20,000 soldiers standing together, she couldn't accept watching her good friend being killed without any help. I'm going. Anna's gaze became firm. She looked at Meg and said, Uncle Meg, I want to join the Night Elves. If only the spell formation wasn't broken. I could ask my father to lend me 20,000 soldiers. Then, we would be evenly matched, Barbara said regretfully. Gina, I want Lantish to do the first thing for me, Meg said to Gina. Mr. Meg, please go ahead. Gina stood up and looked at Meg solemnly. Doing 3 things for Meg was Lantish's promise. I want to invite all the warriors of Lantish who can leave the sea to go to the underground cavern and help the night elves, Meg said in Lantish language. Gina nodded and said, I will pass your words to the high priest using the flying fish. I believe he will abide by the agreement. Meg looked at everyone and said, the powerhouses of Lantish will go with us to reach a balance with the Wind Forest in terms of powerhouses. Our goal is not to fight to the death with the elves, but to help the night elves defeat the Wind Forest army in this siege. Lantish? What kind of power is that? They are on par with the elves. Camilla was puzzled. Although the elves' power wasn't ranked at the top on the Norland continent, they were still a big race. She had never heard of Lantish before. If you go, you'll know. Meg kept her in suspense. Camilla was a 9th-tier powerhouse. If he could get her to join them, she would be a great help. Camilla looked at Meg and thought for a while. Finally, she nodded. Although I don't know them, if you are not lying, and they are really on par with the Wind Forest in terms of numbers and power, then count me in. You will not be disappointed. Meg nodded and turned to look at Elizabeth and Yabamia. Mia, Elizabeth, I need you to help transport the people of Lantish to the underground cavern. Sure. Although I am not good at fighting, I have already learned how to fly. Mia nodded quickly. Elizabeth hesitated for a while, and also nodded slightly. She knew Meg wasn't lying. The number of powerhouses in Lantish was indeed enough to go against the elves. However, she didn't expect Meg to use a chance to command an entire race for 2 restaurant employees. We need to keep this operation a secret. We can't reveal any information to anyone. Otherwise, it will bring us a lot of trouble. Can you do that? Meg said to everyone solemnly. Everyone nodded. Camilla hesitated for a while, and also nodded. Anyway, the relationship between the demons and elves had always been bad. It didn't matter if they didn't report this to their race. Everyone reached a consensus, and the mobilization meeting ended. Mia and the rest cleared the table, and Meg took out the secret letter he had written in the morning and passed it to Gina. Gina summoned a flying fish with wings, and stuffed the secret letter into its mouth to make it fly back to Lantish. Without the support of a sufficient army, Meg knew that he had to play a more powerful role in this war. Luckily, he still had 15 minutes to spare. Moreover, he still had to consider how to remove Amy's name from this war after the event to avoid being punished by the Wind Forest. After the lunch service ended, Meg got the system to finish the renovation of the designated hot pot area, and connected it to the restaurant. He also hung a new notice at the door. Hot pot is officially launched. Customers in a group, please find a table with the right number of people and fill it up. Customers traveling alone, please take a seat in the 9 grid area. Only when all 9 people are seated can the hot pot be served. Note, giant dragons and transformable customers, please take a seat in the open air. Wow, Mr. Mac is so efficient. He just tried it yesterday, and he is already launching hot pot today. Moreover, he has already completed the renovation of the restaurant. Vanessa came to the restaurant early to line up. She turned to look at Abraham and said, "Uncle, let's have hot pot today." Hot pot. Abraham murmured. Mr. Mac didn't say if Vanessa could eat hot pot yesterday, but that bright red pot didn't look very friendly. "I'll just eat the clear soup. I won't touch any chili," Vanessa promised immediately after seeing Abraham's hesitation. "Can I share a table with you?" Randy asked with a smile as he came forward. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1239. When we reach Chaos City, I will bring all of you to taste the most delicious food in the world, the leading golden dragon said loudly as 4 golden dragons with a wingspan of over 100 meters glided in the sky. "Jinx, we are here with a mission today. It's not very good to eat first, right?" A golden dragon asked doubtfully. "It doesn't affect us at all because our mission is to go to that restaurant. We can do the mission while we eat." Jinx laughed heartily. This was really a good mission. At the same time, a few frost dragons glided across the sky of Chaos City, landed in the city, and transformed into their human forms. "Master Fox, we have received accurate news that Miss Elizabeth is now working as a service staff member at Mamie's. Do you want to go over now?" Not long after the Frost WIRMS landed, a young man quickly stepped forward and spoke respectfully to the person in the lead. A cold glint flashed across Fox's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He sneered and said, "Let's go. Let us see how our Miss Elizabeth looks like as a service staff member." "Fox, we are here on the Great Elder's orders to invite Miss Elizabeth back to the clan. I hope you can control your words and actions," an elderly man at the side said in a deep voice. "I know what to do." Fox walked straight ahead. That elderly man sighed softly as he looked at Fox's back. The feud between Fox and Elizabeth was obviously unresolvable. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious in this battle for the chief's position. However, one thing was for sure. Elizabeth had already displayed her powerful talent, which reminded people of Rankster who went against the trend back then. No matter whether it was her ruthlessness or her tenacity to never give up, they were all moving and could not be ignored. Furthermore, the difference between Elizabeth and Lantist was that this time, the Golden Dragon Tribe had already announced that they could accept Elizabeth into the Golden Dragon Tribe, and even let her participate in the fight for the position of Chief of the Golden Dragon Tribe. Elizabeth's power had already leaped to the top among the younger generation on Dragon Island. If nothing went wrong, she would be able to become the top existence on Dragon Island in no time. Hence, after confirming Elizabeth's location, Douglas sent someone to invite Elizabeth to return, and even ordered Forcus to come personally. This was an attitude of admitting defeat. It had never happened in the history of the Frost Dragon Tribe. If everything went according to plan, the Golden Dragon Tribe was already on their way. The Golden Dragon Tribe, whose younger generation of geniuses had been cut off, did not conceal their desire for Elizabeth at all. Although it sounded a little ridiculous to let a frost dragon become the chief of the Golden Dragon Tribe, Elizabeth had a quarter of the Golden Dragon Tribe's blood flowing in her veins, after all. With Rankster's prestige back then, the Golden Dragon Tribe wouldn't care about such a joke. After all, this was a world where the strong spoke with their fists. In order to let the customers have a deeper understanding of how to eat hot pot, all the staff at Amy's demonstrated the correct way to eat hot pot to the customers tonight. Everyone at Amy's ate to their heart's content and was sweating profusely. The surrounding customers sniffed their noses and swallowed their saliva with resentment in their eyes. Meg wiped his red mouth with a tissue before standing on the stairs and announcing loudly, "Everyone, please line up first. We will officially start business in a while. The designated hot pot area is open today. Customers who choose to eat hot pot, please take a seat in the designated area on the right. The designated hot pot area only serves hot pot and alcohol. No other food will be provided. If we choose hot pot, we have to give up the tofu pudding. Oh my God, isn't this too cruel? Then what about my stinky tofu? I want to eat stinky tofu and hot pot today. If that's the case, I suddenly feel that beer and hot pot should go well together." Mr. Mack specially opened up a designated hot pot area and custom-made hot pot tables. If we want to eat hot pot and other food, there won't be any place to put the dishes. Many customers lamented, but there were also many who could understand. The center of the hot pot table was the hot pot, and there was a set of utensils in front of everyone. There was also a variety of hot pot ingredients, so there really wasn't any place to put other dishes. Meg turned around and entered the restaurant with a smile. He didn't explain much. The hot pot was released in a hurry, and he didn't have time to hire new waiters. Although the hot pot was considered a semi-self-service restaurant, it still required people to take orders and serve the dishes. The number of customers had doubled, and the waiters who were already busy running around in circles would probably break their legs tonight. Mia and the others cleaned up the table, and Elizabeth used frost magic to clean up the oil stains on the table. The hot pot table was instantly free of oil stains. "Wow, this beautiful big sister is so awesome," Vanessa exclaimed. All the waiters in the restaurant were very beautiful. She even felt that if she were to apply for a job, she most likely wouldn't be qualified to be a waitress in the restaurant. In the entire food and beverage industry, only Mr. Mack can make an 8th-tier frost dragon clean the table, Abraham said with a complicated expression. This was no longer a simple matter of being rich. Giant dragons were a proud race, and with the pride of an 8th-tier powerhouse, there was no way she would be willing to be a waitress in a restaurant. Our Miss Elizabeth is really proficient in using frost magic to clean the table. A frost dragon is actually cooped up in a small restaurant to work for a human. She's serving these stupid and low-level fellows. Does the Great Elder still want her to be the chief of the frost dragon tribe? Fox sneered as he looked at Elizabeth in the crowd. A few frost dragons also had angry looks on their faces. Such behavior was undoubtedly smearing the reputation of the frost dragon tribe, and shaming the entire tribe. That elderly man looked at Elizabeth with a sullen expression. He had thought that Elizabeth might have been forced to live in Chaos City because of her injuries. However, there wasn't any reluctance on her face. Her breathing was stable, and her injuries seemed to have healed. Yet, she was willing to use frost magic to clean the table. Could it be that she had lost her pride as a giant dragon and a powerhouse? Elizabeth seemed to have sensed something. She turned to look at Fox and the rest in the crowd, and her brows furrowed. The air around her suddenly became cold. "Let's go back and prepare. Boss is so mean. We're all sticky from eating," Yabamiya said with a smile as she hooked her arm around Elizabeth's. Elizabeth retracted the cold aura around her, and followed Yabamiya into the restaurant. She whispered, "Mia, don't serve those fellows in white today. They're not good people." Yabamiya wanted to turn around. "Don't turn around. Don't let them notice you." Elizabeth let go of Yabamiya's hand, and quickly walked into the restaurant. Chapter 1240. Damn, why are there so many people? don't tell me we have to queue for a long time. Jinx led the golden dragons, who had transformed into human forms, to the entrance of Amy's. He could not help but stare at the long queue in front of the door. Queue? What's that? A giant dragon asked in confusion. You mean we have to stand behind those people? A giant dragon asked tentatively. We are the warriors of the Golden Dragon tribe. Why would we have to queue? It's just a meal. We can just walk to the front. The last giant dragon pursed his lips and walked to the front of the queue. Then, he said to Crassus, who was standing at the front, Hey, old man, give the Golden Dragon tribe some face. Let us cut in, wait. He is. Jinx's expression changed, and he hurriedly spoke. Bam! Before Jinx could finish his sentence, the man who had spoken earlier had already flown over their heads at an even faster speed, and crashed into the bushes hundreds of meters away. The god of fire, Crassus. Jinx only managed to finish his sentence now. The god of fire. The other two golden dragons who were rolling up their sleeves and preparing to take revenge for their brother silently rolled their sleeves down. They looked around and used their hands as fans to fan themselves, pretending not to know that fellow. That golden dragon only got up after a while in the bushes. Although his skin was thick and he did not suffer any injuries, he did not feel good after taking such a solid hit. He looked at Crassus with fear. This old man was too scary. The customers were secretly shocked and they saw Crassus send a golden dragon flying with a single hit. At the same time, they suppressed the thought of cutting in line. After all, not everyone was confident that they could get up after being hit. It seems like the Golden Dragon tribe has indeed received the news. The leader is Jinx. The people from the Frost Dragon tribe also noticed Jinx and the others, and their eyes flashed with hostility. Elizabeth's matter was originally an internal matter of the Frost Dragon tribe. Now that the Golden Dragons had interfered, they had no choice but to lower their heads. Otherwise, if Elizabeth joined the Golden Dragons, not only would the Frost Dragon tribe lose a future powerhouse, but they might also make a strong enemy. They also took a few more glances at Crassus. They had long heard that Crassus and Julian had taken in a disciple in Chaos City, but they didn't expect to see him in this restaurant today. Could that be the god of fire, Crassus? The Golden Dragon asked softly as he walked back while rubbing his chest. Congratulations, you're right. Jinx nodded, and led everyone to the back of the line. Oh my god. I actually want to cut the fire god's queue. The Golden Dragon began to rub his little heart. He secretly rejoiced that the club hadn't killed him. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Look, those fellows from the Frost Dragon tribe are here as well, a golden colossal dragon reminded. Some fellows are really thick-skinned. They still dare to come. If it were me, I would hide myself and not see anyone, Jinx sneered. He didn't control his volume, so Fox and the rest could hear him. Humph. Fox snorted with a black face. His eyelids twitched as he tried to suppress his anger. The Frost Dragons didn't look too good either. The Golden Dragons and the Frost Dragons didn't have a good relationship to begin with. Now that Elizabeth's matter had happened, the Golden Dragons suddenly said that they wanted to fight for Elizabeth. That made the situation even worse. The customers who were sandwiched between the two groups of giant dragons felt a strong feeling of ice and fire, but they didn't dare to say anything. This was a group of 8th tier and 9th tier giant dragons. After entering the restaurant, Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth, who didn't look too good, and asked with concern, "Are those people the bad guys who hurt you?" Elizabeth looked at Yabamiya, and hesitated for a while before nodding. "This time, I will definitely protect you. I won't let anyone hurt you again," Yabamiya said to Elizabeth. Elizabeth's heart warmed, and she helplessly said, "They are very powerful. They are even more powerful than me." Then I will still stand in front of you, Yabamiya said firmly. Meg, who had changed into a new chef's uniform, went downstairs. He tidied his clothes, and reminded everyone to get ready. Then, he walked straight to the door, opened it, and smilingly said, "Welcome to Amy's. Customers who want to eat hot pot, please go to the designated hot pot area. Other customers, please take your seats in the original area." Meg's gaze quickly noticed the frost dragons led by Fox and golden dragons led by Jinx. His eyes narrowed. These fellows had appeared in groups, and they were most likely here for Elizabeth. Were they going to capture her after discovering her whereabouts? That made Meg feel a little worried. These fellows were all around 8th tier or 9th tier. They were a little tricky. The customers, who had been craving hot pot for a long time, filed into the restaurant, and greeted Meg warmly. Meg also smiled in response. He could remember the names of all the customers. "Mr. Mac, thank you for the toothpaste and toothbrush. My teeth didn't hurt for even a moment today," Vanessa said gratefully as she walked to the door. "Remember to brush your teeth in the morning and evening." Meg smiled. The omniscient door's description of Vanessa's teeth didn't change. Clearly, it wasn't something that could be changed by brushing her teeth twice. However, it was a good thing that it could alleviate her pain. Vanessa nodded. She walked into the restaurant, and went straight to the designated hot pot area. "Thank you, Mr. Mac," Abraham said gratefully to Meg. Abraham thanked Meg. He was happy to see Vanessa's pain lessen. The customers all took their seats. By the time the frost dragons and golden dragons arrived, there was only a 9-seat grid outside the designated hot pot area left. The two groups looked at each other, and walked to that table at the same time. The tension in the air rose instantly. They were silent, but it was as if a battle was going to break out at any time. "Fuck, I'm just a little late. Does it have to be so exciting?" Harrison looked at the only seat left, and the two groups of muscular men in silver armor and golden armor. He hesitated for a long time, but his cravings eventually won over his rationality. He walked over carefully, and sat down at the last seat. The two groups of giant dragons looked at Harrison at the same time. This fat and stupid human actually dared to sit at the same table as them. Harrison smiled politely at the two groups. His fat jiggled as he pointed at the grid in front of him, and meekly said, "I want this grid." Chapter 1241. All the giant dragons lowered their heads at the same time to look at the big pot that was separated by 2 horizontal and 2 horizontal metal plates. It was divided into 9 small sections. What kind of eating method was this? When the frost dragons arrived, Meg and the rest had just finished their hot pot. Meanwhile, the golden dragons didn't even know what they were eating. They just saw an empty seat and didn't want to wait, so they sat down right away. All the giant dragons stared at each other. None of them spoke, in case they were discovered to be clueless. Since the giant dragons didn't speak, Harrison didn't dare to speak either. Although he looked calm, he was actually panicking inside. If not for the fact that he didn't want to wait an hour for an empty hot pot seat, he wouldn't want to eat hot pot with 8 giant dragons. "Fox, I heard that you were severely injured by Alex's pig. Are you able to run and jump now? You even came to Chaos City." Jinx asked Fox with a mocking smile, not bothering to hide his disdain at all. All the golden dragons laughed too. This was one of the annual news on Dragon Island. A wild boar from Fire Dragon Island almost killed the chief candidate of the Frost Dragon tribe. This was probably the peak of that pig's life. Harrison raised his eyebrows and looked at Fox. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he forced himself to hold back his smile. That smile could be fatal, but it was too funny. A giant dragon that could fly was seriously injured by a wild boar. Could that wild boar fly? The frost dragons didn't look too good. This incident had already made the frost dragons the laughingstock of Dragon Island. Wherever they went, they would hear those fellows discussing and laughing behind their backs. Now, Jinx had even brought it up in public, not giving any face to the frost dragons at all. Fox's face was also a little dark. This incident had become a dark history that he could never erase. He looked up at Jinx and sneered, "Jinx, you were also known as the prodigy of the golden dragons and the successor of the chief. Now, you're here to lick an abandoned daughter of the frost dragons. Do you want her to be your queen? The golden colossal dragon is really shameless." "Chief. I gave it up willingly." Jinx looked at Fox with a smile and said, "You have no idea how much our chief wants me to be the chief, but I just don't want to be the chief. Don't you think that's infuriating? Just console yourself." The veins on Fox's forehead throbbed, and he really wanted to punch Jinx's cheeky face. This was something that he wanted his entire life, but this fellow had easily delayed it. He was indeed very angry, so angry that he was about to go crazy. One has to know one's place. Rankster had beaten both our races into submission back then, and killed all those who refused to submit to him. With such a terrifying person as the chief, of course no one would be unconvinced. Jinx sneered. "But who do you think you are? He barely made it to the 9th tier when he was 400 years old. God knows how many drugs he took secretly. He's so far behind Rankster. Now, even his daughter is catching up to you. Back then, you couldn't compete with her father, and now you're competing with the younger generation. Don't you feel ashamed? If I were you, I would find a sow and kill myself." Harrison turned around silently, and let out a sinister and silent smile. These giant dragons probably wanted to kill him. Fox's expression alternated between black and white. If he had already received the Great Elder's warning before he came, he would definitely have a duel with Jinx. "What are you looking at? Can you beat me?" Jinx asked with a smile. "Jinx, don't go overboard." The elder sitting beside Fox shouted coldly, and the surrounding temperature plummeted. The frost dragons also released their auras, and pressed down on the other side. "Do you want to fight?" Jinx and the other golden dragons also pressed back mercilessly. Both sides were at daggers drawn, and seemed to be about to fight. Harrison held on to the table, and tried his best not to slip under the table. It was not easy for him to eat hot pot. "Forget it, I won't argue with you guys today. We're here to persuade Miss Elizabeth to join the Golden Dragon tribe and become a candidate for the chief." Jack suddenly retracted his aura, and leaned back comfortably with a smile. The confrontation dissipated instantly. The frost dragons hesitated for a moment, and also retracted their auras with ugly expressions. Both sides had the same goal today, and that was to target Elizabeth. The Golden Dragon tribe was the maternal tribe of Elizabeth's grandmother. However, she had grown up in the Frost Dragon tribe. Moreover, her grandmother had been executed by the Golden Dragon tribe back then. It was unknown whether she was willing to assimilate into the Golden Dragon tribe. In the previous battle for the chief, Elizabeth, who was forced to challenge Fox, was almost killed, and no one in the tribe helped her. In the end, it was because of Alex's appearance that she was brought away from the Frost Dragon tribe. Under such circumstances, no one knew if she was willing to return. Harrison was quite taken aback upon hearing that. He didn't think that young Mistress Elizabeth would have such a high status that two major dragon tribes would fight over her. At that moment, he only had one thought in his mind: Boss Mag is badass. "Hey, little fatty, what's this pot for?" Jinx asked Harrison. "Jinx, didn't you say you've been here before?" A golden dragon questioned. "There was no such thing the last time I was here." Jinx shrugged. He was also very innocent. Fatty. Harrison looked left and right. Yes, it's you, little fatty. Jinx confirmed. After confirming that Jinx was calling him, Harrison suddenly felt a little emotional. He had not heard anyone call him that for more than 10 years. Now, most people called him damn fatty, big fatty, fat uncle, given that dragons were easily hundreds of years old, and their wingspan was 100 meters, it seemed quite reasonable to call him, who was 150 kilograms in the eyes of ordinary people, little fatty. These giant dragons came at the wrong time. They did not get to experience the cruel scene of Mr. Mac and his family. They did not even know what hot pot was. Harrison, who hadn't dared to interrupt all this while, finally had the chance to speak. He coughed softly and said, "Well, it's hot pot. It's a 9 grid, and this table can seat 9 people. Each of us will claim a grid, and then we'll just put the various ingredients inside." The giant dragons looked at him, and then at the empty pot. They were confused, and the air seemed to have solidified. Harrison was also silent for a while. Then, he picked up the hot pot guide, flipped it open, and said, "The soup base has not been served yet. We have to order it ourselves. The soup base is divided into 2 types, red soup and clear soup. The red soup has 3 flavors to choose from, medium spicy, spicy, and insanely spicy. After ordering the soup base, we will order the dishes to be boiled." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1242. What a dreamy scene. He was actually teaching a group of giant dragons how to cook hot pot. Harrison felt that he had reached the peak of his life. After Harrison's complicated explanation, the giant dragons still did not fully understand. "You're saying that we have to cook ourselves?" a frost dragon asked Harrison. The other giant dragons also looked at Harrison. As the powerhouses of the tribe, it was naturally not their turn to cook. That was something that only those useless people who could not cultivate had to do. Correction, it's hot pot, not cooking. Harrison picked up the hot pot guide in his hand. "Look, it's already recorded in detail how to operate it. Every ingredient has its own unique method of boiling and standard time. As long as you follow the instructions, even a 4-year-old child can make delicious food for himself." All the giant dragons frowned as they looked at the hot pot guide in their hands, but no one reached out to take it. The atmosphere became silent and awkward again. Harrison tactfully shut his mouth. Although he didn't think that he could make any delicious food at first, he believed that he wouldn't lose to the 2 children after seeing how much Little Boss and Little Anna ate by themselves and enjoyed their food. Right at this moment, Elizabeth walked over and asked in a cold voice, "May I know what kind of soup base and vegetables you would like to order?" All the giant dragons looked at Elizabeth at the same time. As the daughter of Rankster, no one could underestimate her even though she had become a waitress in a restaurant. She did not avoid the gaze of everyone at all. She just looked at them calmly. "Humph. If my dead brother knew that his precious daughter actually went to a human restaurant to be a waitress, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to rest in peace even after he died." Fox looked at Elizabeth with a mocking smile. "Then you'd better pray that he's already dead. Otherwise, not being smashed to death by a pig will be your greatest regret," Elizabeth said in a cold voice as she looked at Fox coldly. Fox's expression changed slightly. He suddenly shuddered when he thought of those giant dragons that were tortured to death by Rankster. Given his character, if he's not dead, how could there be no news of him for so long? "Don't expect him to come back and support you," Fox said as calmly as he could. "He has never backed me up, and I don't need anyone to back me up." Elizabeth pursed her lips. "Even if he's dead, sooner or later, I'll use the same method as him to make you pay for what you've done." "You?" Fox was furious. Elizabeth actually dared to threaten him. Miss Elizabeth, we're here to take you home. The elder sitting beside Fox looked at Elizabeth and lowered his voice. With your status, it's not suitable for you to be a waiter. You'll bring shame to the reputation of the Frost Dragon tribe. Should I have died on the Frost battlefield to be worthy of your so-called honor and reputation? Elizabeth sneered as she looked at the old man and the other two clansmen. This made her think of that day on the Frost battlefield, those elders of the clan who stood on the high platform and sneered. Their smiles were so vicious and disgusting. The old man furrowed his brows and his voice deepened. The first elder asked us to bring you back. The elder council has decided to let bygones be bygones. Do you think I should thank you for your magnanimity? Elizabeth interrupted the old man. The old man choked. He looked at the mocking smile on Elizabeth's face. It was as if he saw the shadow of Rankster who killed his way into the Frost Dragon Island alone and was unstoppable. The Frost Dragons frowned as well. They had already given in. What else did Elizabeth want? A bunch of old men bullying a young lady, and now you dare to say that you'll let bygones be bygones? I've underestimated the thickness of the Frost Dragon tribe's skin. Jack pursed his lips before smiling at Elizabeth. Miss Elizabeth, I'm Jinx from the Golden Dragon tribe. I'm here on the orders of the chief and the elder council to invite you to Golden Island. You'll be appointed as one of the successors of the Golden Dragon tribe and compete fairly with the younger generation of the Golden Dragon tribe. The commotion here attracted the attention of many guests. Upon hearing that, everyone looked at Elizabeth differently. The successor of the Golden Dragon tribe's chief, which meant that she might become the chief of the Golden Dragon tribe in the future. Oh my God! The one serving them now might be the future chief of the Golden Dragon tribe. In the restaurant, Yabamiya, who was ordering food for the guests, looked at Elizabeth worriedly. Did these baddies want to hurt Elizabeth again? In the kitchen, Meg was also thinking about the purpose of Fox, Jinx, and the other dragons' visit. He had read the information about the dragons, and had some understanding of the relationship between the two tribes. Because of Rankster, the two tribes were once like fire and water. Later on, they were defeated by Rankster. The relationship between Rankster and Alex was also a little complicated. The two of them had fought many times, and Alex had the upper hand. 3 years ago, after Alex was ambushed and disappeared in the rain, Rankster also disappeared. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Elizabeth was Rankster's only daughter, and also the most powerful member of the younger generation of the Frost Dragon tribe. Fox was Rankster's younger brother. Back then, he had the chance to inherit the position of chief. Now, he was a strong contender for the position of chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. However, Fox was not a kind uncle. Back then, on the Frost battlefield, he had intended to kill Elizabeth on the spot. However, he was injured by a pig thrown at him, and saved Elizabeth. Did he bring people here to seek revenge today, or did he have other intentions? When the Frost Dragons heard Jinx's words, they became a little nervous. The Golden Dragon tribe had put in a lot of effort and used the position of chief as a bargaining chip. If Elizabeth agreed, then the purpose of their trip would be completely ruined. Sorry, I will not join the Golden Dragon tribe. Elizabeth looked at Jinx and shook her head. Her tone was firm without any hesitation. All the Frost Dragons heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. Why? Compared to those hypocritical Frost Dragons, Golden Dragons have always been known for their frankness and straightforwardness. On Golden Dragon Island, with your strength, you would be able to gain the respect and support of many dragons. But on that island, you would only receive unfair treatment, Jinx said, perplexed. He returned all the injustice back then in double. Elizabeth glanced at Fox. I will do the same. Jinx looked at Elizabeth with admiration in his eyes. This last did have some of Rankster's shadow. He also smiled. Alright, the Golden Dragon Tribe is still open to you. As long as you are willing, you can come to Golden Island anytime. As long as you say the word, the warriors of Golden Island are willing to fight for you. If you want to talk about Daddy's Otherworldly Restaurant with more like-minded people, follow Excellent Reading Literature on WeChat. Talk about life, find confidence. Chapter 1243. Fox felt uneasy for some reason, just like the illegitimate son he looked down on back then. Every time that illegitimate son appeared, everyone would be terrified. Now, Elizabeth made him feel that way again. The strong uneasiness made him want to kill her to prevent any future trouble. However, this was Chaos City, and Jinx was watching from the side. It was not a good opportunity to make a move. The Frost Dragons also looked a little uncomfortable. Rankster had stirred up trouble in the Frost Dragon Tribe back then, and almost reshuffled the entire Frost Dragon Tribe. Could it be that Elizabeth wanted to go down Rankster's path again? Many customers were shocked. Elizabeth actually rejected the invitation of 2 major dragon tribes. Wasn't she too stubborn? Please order, Elizabeth said calmly. You're not going back to Dragon Island, and you're willing to be a service staff member here. I want to see how far you can go. Fox took a deep look at Elizabeth and sneered in his heart. After that, he flipped open the menu casually. Fox's anus tightened when he saw the insanely spicy red soup. He recalled the fear of being dominated by the insanely spicy grilled fish during the previous peace negotiation. Little fatty, how should we order this soup base? Jinx asked Harrison. All the giant dragons also looked at Harrison. It was their first time eating hot pot, and they had no experience, but they couldn't show that they didn't know. If you're a man, eat the insanely spicy. Harrison said with a pat on his chest. That sounds interesting. Jinx nodded, and then said to Elizabeth, give me 4 insanely spicy red soup bases. Then, he looked at Fox and the rest provocatively, and mocked, why? You don't even dare to eat the insanely spicy. Insanely spicy it is. Who's afraid? A frost dragon said without hesitation. The other 2 followed. Fox's throat moved, and he was struggling. Scared? Jinx sneered. 1 insanely spicy, Fox said in a low voice. He consciously used frost to protect his anus this time, so he shouldn't be so miserable. I'll have a spicy one, with less pepper, Harrison said quickly. All the giant dragons turned to look at him at the same time. Didn't this guy just say that men should be insanely spicy? I'm just a little fatty. Harrison said meekly. He was just saying that for a moment. He didn't expect these giant dragons to really order the insanely spicy. That was too scary. The giant dragons thought for a while, and accepted Harrison's explanation very naturally. That made sense. If a little fatty ate the same things as them, wouldn't it make them look the same as the little fatty? Please tick the soup pot, the dish you want, and the number of servings on the menu, Elizabeth reminded him. Spicy soup pot, 1 for each dish. Harrison picked up the pencil on the menu, selected the spicy soup pot, and wrote a line of words. Then I'll have an insanely spicy soup pot with 10 servings of each dish. Jinx wrote on the menu. +1, +1, +1, the 3 golden colossal dragons quickly agreed. The frost dragons looked at each other and agreed. Please wait for a moment. For the dipping sauce, please go to the condiments area to mix it. Elizabeth kept the menu and the 9-grid hot pot on the table, and turned to walk towards the kitchen. While the customers outside were still waiting, some of the customers in the restaurant had already had their hot pots served. The design of this soup pot is really discriminating against light eaters. Vanessa looked at the soup pot in front of her. The small pot was filled with thick white soup, and the spicy soup pot was surrounded by red chili and chili oil. The size ratio was about 1:5. It was like a pitiful little lamb surrounded by a pack of wolves. The design of this pot in a pot is really artistic and practical, Randy exclaimed. He picked up a piece of beef with his chopsticks and put it into the pot. He smiled and said, "I'm going to start eating." "Miss, what do you want to eat?" "I'll cook it for you," Laura quickly said when she saw that Vanessa was about to start. With the princess's noble status, how could she cook for herself? That was not in line with etiquette. "No way. You cook for yourself." "I want to cook for myself." Vanessa had already picked up a long piece of duck intestine, and said seriously, "Mr. Max said that the soul of the hot pot is to cook it yourself. The duck intestine cooked by others has no soul." After saying that, Vanessa stared at the clock on the wall as she picked up the duck intestine and dipped it in the boiling soup pot. After a few dips, the duck intestine indeed became curled, and she rolled it in her own dipping sauce. As she couldn't eat things that were too spicy, her dipping sauce followed one of the recommended light recipes. She only added oyster sauce, soy sauce, minced garlic, coriander, and sesame oil, and poured half a spoonful of hot soup over it. After rolling the duck intestine in the dipping sauce, the temperature immediately dropped significantly. She then put it into her mouth and chewed gently. The duck intestine looked soft, but it was crispy when she bit into it. The crunchy and chewy texture made her teeth squeal in joy, and brought her teeth an incomparable pleasure. The dipping sauce gave the duck intestine an interesting soul as it alternated between hot and cold. The dipping sauce gave the duck intestine its flavor, and it was a delicious feast for her teeth and taste buds. After swallowing the duck intestine, Vanessa felt that her teeth were still savoring that wonderful moment. "This duck intestine is too delicious. Furthermore, I cooked it myself," Vanessa exclaimed with her eyes wide open. What was even more amazing was that she cooked the duck intestine herself. For a princess who had never been in a kitchen, or even seen a chef cook with her own eyes, this feeling of accomplishment was even more intense than receiving a gem from the king. Laura, who was still thinking that the princess should cook for herself, smiled when she saw Vanessa's expression. It seemed that the princess really liked to eat this way. In that case, she would also try this new way of eating. "This fat beef is simply the best." Randy chewed on the fat beef with an intoxicated expression. The tender beef was sliced very thinly, and it could be eaten immediately after being dipped into the boiling soup. The tender texture and rich meaty aroma were intoxicating. After being dipped into the spicy red soup, the spicy taste of the fat beef made one's scalp tingle. It instantly chased away the chill from standing outside for more than an hour, and it was a refreshing feeling. Randy picked up another piece of fat beef and placed it into the boiling soup. He lamented, "The most beautiful thing in the world is probably eating meat. It will never lie to you, and it will never betray you. Eat a pound, grow a pound, and it will always be honest with you." "I agree with what you said." Abraham picked up a piece of tripe and placed it into the pot. He glanced at his own stomach. Chapter 1244. Your soup pots and dishes have all been served. Please enjoy. Elizabeth pushed the last trolley to Harrison's side, and then placed the 9-square grid full of red soup back in the center of the table. She faced Harrison with the spicy portion, and pressed the heating button on the side of the table. A strong spicy smell wafted over immediately. A golden dragon's nostrils flapped quickly, and then it turned its head to sneeze. What is this smell? All the giant dragons squinted their eyes. This smell was too pungent. It was really unbearable for the dragons. This is the insanely spicy that only real men would dare to try. Harrison covered his nose and leaned back. He was secretly glad that he had ordered the spicy dish. Indeed, only perverts could withstand the insanely spicy dish. He wondered if these giant dragons would go crazy after eating it. We can't lose to the other party in terms of presents. All the giant dragons looked at each other, and had the same thought. Isn't it just a little spicy? This is nothing. It's just ordinary, Jinx said casually. He picked up a chili floating on the red soup with his chopsticks, and looked at Fox provocatively as he said, "Want one?" After saying that, he chewed on the dried chili with crunching sounds. Halfway through chewing, Jinx's face had already started to turn red. This was no longer just a simple spiciness. The suffocating spiciness made his taste buds hurt. The numbing sensation seemed to reach straight to his soul. He even felt like his soul had left his body. His mind was blank, and his eyes were white. Fuck, this boss put poison in the chili. A thought flashed through Jinx's mind immediately. Then, he regained his vision. However, his mouth was still burning from the spiciness, and his forehead was full of sweat. He looked at Fox, who was looking at him sideways, and squeezed out a smug smile. "Are you scared now?" "Fuck, this guy is crazy." Fox's heart skipped a few beats, but his expression was still calm. "I'm not going to argue with a fool." Harrison got used to the spiciness very quickly. He let go of his nose, and then picked up a piece of tripe with his chopsticks. He imitated Mr. Mac and the others, and started to cook the tripe in the rolling grid in front of him. The table was very big, and so was the 9-grid hot pot. Although it was divided into 9 sections, each section was almost equivalent to a small pot. It was more than enough for one person to cook the hot pot. Moreover, the heating of these 9 squares should be independent. Every square seemed to be boiling at the same time. There was no situation where the heat in the middle was strong and the sides were lukewarm. The tripe floated up and down in the boiling hot and spicy soup pot and was covered in a layer of red soup. Then, it was dipped in the dipping sauce that had just been prepared and fed into his mouth. The spicy broth exploded in the mouth like a pioneer, followed by the crispy tripe. It was as thin as a leaf, but it didn't have the slightest hardness or toughness when chewed. The crispy texture was completely unexpected, making people unable to stop eating. "This tripe is amazing." Harrison was full of admiration. He didn't think that he could cook such delicious food. Harrison picked up another piece of tripe with his chopsticks and began to cook. His expression was serious and focused as if he was doing something very sacred. He threw away all distracting thoughts and made every movement and operation of his to be in the most perfect state in order to let the tripe be in the most perfect state. The 8 giant dragons at the dining table were all staring at that piece of tripe in Harrison's hand. It was a small and thin piece of tripe, but it had to go up and down in the pot several times. Just looking at it was enough to give them a headache. However, the way this little fatty ate was really a little tempting. Another piece of tripe wrapped in red soup was done. Harrison put it into his mouth in one gulp. He squinted his eyes and chewed with a look of enjoyment. His eyebrows twitched spiritedly, and his expression was full of bliss. The crisp sound of his teeth chewing on the tripe made everyone who heard it feel like their teeth were enjoying it. Gulp. All the giant dragons swallowed their saliva almost at the same time. "Damn it, this little fatty is eating too happily, isn't he?" All the giant dragons looked at the ingredients for the 10 people beside them, but they had a headache. They didn't know where to start. "Seems like we still have to look at the manual." Jinx picked up that hot pot manual, and read it seriously with a frown. The other 3 golden dragons also copied him and flipped through the manual. This food was different from what they had eaten before, and they had to cook it themselves. This was a huge test for them. Fox looked at the ingredients beside him, and then at the boiling pot in front of him. He frowned, and turned to look at Elizabeth, who was serving the dishes to the customers at the side. He ordered, "You, come over and cook the hot pot for me." Many customers who had already started to cook the hot pot turned to look at Fox and Elizabeth. What is this fellow trying to do? Is he purposely making things difficult for Miss Elizabeth? Elizabeth's movements froze. She put down the pot gently, and turned to look at Fox. The restaurant's rules are that the customers should cook the hot pot themselves. The service staff will not participate in the cooking. I'm eating here, but you want me to cook for myself. What kind of bullshit rule is this? Fox leaned back in his chair, and looked at Elizabeth arrogantly. I am a noble giant dragon. My hands are used to fight, not to do lowly things like cooking. Aren't you a service staff? Come over and cook all these dishes for me now. This is what you should do. Elizabeth clenched her fists, but her expression was still restrained. She didn't want to affect Amy's because of her, nor did she want the people in the restaurant to be implicated because of her. She knew very well that this dragon scum, Fox, could do anything. When Fox saw Elizabeth's expression, he became even more fearless. Didn't you say that customers are gods? I order you to come over now. Cook all the ingredients for us respectfully, and then put them into my mouth. Otherwise, I won't let this matter rest. The commotion had attracted the attention of many customers. Everyone looked at Fox with disgust. Such a scum appearing at Amy's was really ruining their appetites. Didn't he see that the service staff was already running away to serve the dishes? This guy actually wanted Miss Elizabeth to cook the hot pot for him. How shameless. Elizabeth pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. Then, she gritted her teeth and walked forward. I'll cook for you. At this moment, Yabamiya ran past Elizabeth and came to the table. She picked up a pair of chopsticks and was about to pick up the duck intestines. Mia! Elizabeth stopped and looked at Yabamiya's back. She clenched her fists. Who wants a lowly half-dragon like you? Fox frowned and shouted angrily. He looked up at Yabamiya, but his voice suddenly stopped. He was shocked. She's one of us. Jinx had already stood up and looked at Yabamiya in surprise. Mia, come here. Right at this moment, a gentle voice sounded. Meg had already arrived at the entrance of the restaurant. He waved at Mia with a cold expression. Chapter 1245. Boss. Yabamiya, who was a little frightened by Fox's scolding, turned around, and saw Meg waving at her from the door. Her eyes reddened immediately, but she was a little hesitant about whether she would draw the anger of these customers onto her boss if she went over. Come here, Meg repeated. Yabamiya immediately put down her chopsticks, and walked towards Meg. Wait! Fox and Jinx called out almost at the same time. However, Yabamiya did not hesitate this time. She walked straight to Meg's side and hid behind him before sneaking a peek over there. These fellows indeed looked like bad guys. They looked so scary and not friendly at all. Fox's face was filled with shock and anger. He was angry that this little waitress dared to ignore his words. He was shocked that this woman was actually a golden dragon. If he remembered correctly, the last time he was here, she was only a lowly half-race. Jinx and the other golden dragons were also shocked. They were 100% sure that this little girl had an extremely pure golden bloodline, purer than any other golden dragon on Golden Dragon Island. However, Jinx clearly remembered that he had seen this little girl the last time he came. He did not have any special impression of her then, and only vaguely remembered that there was a half-dragon waitress like her. What happened to her during this period of time? She actually successfully awakened the golden bloodline and became a real golden dragon. Meg shielded Mia behind him, and calmly said to Fox and Jinx, Mia is still young. If there's anything, please tell me. If you have any requests, feel free to state them. If I agree to one of your requests, consider it my loss. Mamie's reputation was really established in Chaos City. He even had the title of the City Lord's Castle's senior consultant now, so he could be considered half a member of the City Lord's Castle. With someone backing him, it was only right for him to be a little arrogant. Of course, even if they really fought, Meg was able to smash Fox into a pig's head with a sow, so he naturally had the confidence to beat him into a pig's head again. Mag's words made the customers smile knowingly. Boss Mag was indeed the boss. This was a ruthless person who even dared to reject a 10th-tier powerhouse's request for another bowl of tofu pudding. Their hearts were all put at ease. Elizabeth looked at Meg. Her eyes flashed and the corners of her mouth curled up. Somehow, she felt a sense of relief. Do you know who I am? A mere restaurant owner dares to speak to me like this. Fox roared angrily. It was one thing for him to be insulted by Jinx and Elizabeth, but now, even this restaurant owner dared to speak to him like that. Hey, uncle, have you ever seen a wild boar fall from the sky? Amy popped out of nowhere and suddenly asked. Fox's expression instantly froze, and the air seemed to freeze as well. Ha ha ha. Jinx burst out laughing. He leaned forward and backward, and said, Fox, has your legendary story become so well known that even little children know about it? The other golden dragons also laughed wildly without holding back. Harrison, who was silently eating hot pot while watching the show, instantly got the joke. Then, he choked, and turned his head away with a painful and hideous smile. The spiciness was fermenting in his nose, but he still had to control his laughter. Didn't they say not to tell jokes when others were eating? Fox looked at Amy, and the veins on his forehead were throbbing. He wanted to swallow her whole. However, his gaze soon found the two big bosses in the restaurant staring at him. It was the gaze of death. The little spark that had just risen in his heart was extinguished instantly. He did not want to experience that suffocating feeling at the entrance of the restaurant again. Moreover, this time, no one was going to speak up for him. As the saying goes, don't expose people's shortcomings when scolding them. Amy is really a master of mine. Meg looked at Amy with satisfaction. When it came to enemies, he had to let them feel the coldness of winter. There was no need to talk about morality. Fox did not dare to touch Amy. His gaze landed on Meg again, and he coldly said, I'm the customer who paid you. Now, I want your waiters to serve me. Are you unhappy? Sir, the hot pot is already in front of you, and all the dishes have been served. The service provided by the restaurant is all in place. What else are you unhappy about? Meg asked with a smile. Do I want the pot and the dishes? I'm a frost dragon. How can I do such things myself? I just want the waiters to cook it for me, and then feed me mouthful by mouthful, Fox said arrogantly. If you don't want to do it, then why are you sitting in the designated hot pot area? Are you here to watch Chili swim? Meg looked at Fox as if he was looking at a retarded child. Moreover, are you unable to move your hands, or is your brain not working well? Why do you need someone to feed you mouthful by mouthful? Sorry, if you want this kind of service, please go home and ask your mother to remake you. This restaurant does not provide it. You. Fox was furious, but he was rendered speechless by Meg's rebuttal. He could not say a word for a long time. Pfft. Vanessa, who was chewing on an enoki mushroom, spat it out. A enoki mushroom hung on Randy's face, who was sitting opposite her. Sorry. It's Mr. Mac. Mr. Mac's words are too funny. Vanessa looked at Randy apologetically. Laura, who was beside them, quickly took out a silk handkerchief and handed it to Randy, trying hard to hold back her laughter. The customers also laughed. Many of them who were eating hot pot choked. They coughed and laughed at the same time. It was really painful and happy at the same time. At the same time, the customers also reached a consensus. In addition to being careful of Little Boss's fireballs, they also had to be careful of Mr. Mac's mouth in the future. Boss is so awesome. Yabamiya, who was standing behind Meg, looked at Meg's back in amazement. Although she felt that the boss's speaking style was a little different from his usual gentle appearance, it felt really good to scold bad guys without using any vulgarities. If it were her, she wouldn't be able to say a single word. As expected of father. I still have to continue to work hard. Amy looked up at Meg thoughtfully, her little face full of admiration. Elizabeth, who was originally a little worried, looked at Fox, whose face was alternating between white and white. She felt like she had vented her anger. Usually, it was only this fellow who was disgusting. She didn't expect that there would be a time when he was humiliated like today. Meg was really surprising. Seems like I have to learn from this little boss when I have time. If I can learn 30 to 40% of his scolding skills, I will be invincible in scolding on Dragon Island. Jinx looked at Meg thoughtfully. Compared to the usual low-level scolding, this was much more advanced. Aren't you afraid that I will tear down this lousy restaurant of yours? Fox stood up slowly. The surrounding temperature plummeted, and there was even frost under his feet. Then you have to ask them if they agree. Meg turned and walked straight into the restaurant. Then, the customers stood up one by one. Chapter 1246. Looking at the customers who stood up one by one, the frost dragons who had slammed the table and stood up to support Fox swallowed their saliva at the same time. Then, they naturally turned around and sat back down. They picked up their chopsticks and began to cook the duck intestines obediently. You want to tear down Amy's? An elder in the Grey Temple's uniform asked Fox with a cold gaze. 10th tier powerhouse. Fox immediately felt the strong pressure coming from the other party, and judging from the other party's identity in the Grey Temple, he could tell that the other party was one of the 4 deputy lords. How are you going to tear it down? A 9th tier demon looked at Fox maliciously. The aura of a peak 9th tier demon was not weaker than Fox's at all. He twisted his neck, and a cracking sound was heard. Why don't you start from my old bones? Novin, who was sitting opposite Crassus, asked with a smile. The customers who were powerful and the customers who were just ordinary people all stood up slowly at this moment and looked at Fox unkindly. This fellow was going to destroy their holy land and insult their faith. This plot is not right. Fox panicked when he felt the stares from the big shots. He did not expect Meg to respond so shamelessly. What could he do? Even Frost Dragon Island was not enough for these beasts to tear down. He would not dare to force himself to tear it down. He would probably die a few times on the spot. I was just joking. To build a harmonious society, it starts with me. How could I tear down such a beautiful restaurant? Fox said with a forced smile. His expression was ugly as if he had eaten a fly. I like this restaurant. I love hot pot. A smile appeared on Elizabeth's face as she relaxed completely. She turned to look in the direction of the kitchen. She didn't expect that Mag would be able to use such an amazing method to make Fox look so pathetic. It was even more satisfying than beating him up. The customers this time are too amazing. Yabamiya looked at the customers who stood up one after another with stars in her eyes. She had never thought that so many strangers would support the restaurant and them. This feeling of being cared for and protected was really good. Of course, this was all because of the boss. The boss treated food with sincerity and made the customers voluntarily guard the restaurant. The Vice Lord of the Grey Temple walked over, and scooped a bowl of red soup from the pot in front of Fox. He placed it in front of him, and gestured, "Cheers." Fox's face turned green as he looked at the insanely spicy red soup with red chili and chili oil floating in the air. "This is a chance for you to express your love. If you miss it, there won't be another chance." That mouthful of chili just now was enough to make his soul leave his body. With this bowl of red soup and chili, Fox would probably ascend to heaven. Fox looked at the malicious gazes around him. He felt that if he did not drink this bowl of red soup today, he would not be able to walk out of this place. But this red soup, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and his throat began to burn even before he swallowed it. "You're not eating." The Vice Palace Master's voice turned even colder. "Cheers." Fox, who sensed the killing intent, lifted the scalding bowl with both hands and drank a mouthful of red oil soup. The scalding hot oil, accompanied by a violent spicy taste, rushed into his mouth instantly. Tisk! Fox clearly heard a soft sound, and his taste buds were all burned to death before they could even cheer. Fox's face turned red immediately, and it quickly spread to his neck and head. His entire body turned red, and white steam rose from the top of his head as if he was in a sauna. The terrifying spicy taste stimulated his scalded wounds violently. Fox's mind was completely blank, and his eyes were also filled with colors. It was as if he had gone blind. The burning sensation made him want to open a hole in his head so that the heat could dissipate slightly. The scalding red soup flowed down his throat like a blunt knife, slicing his throat inch by inch. That feeling was countless times more painful than being killed with a knife. His body began to tremble uncontrollably, and it was not any easier than being tortured. The thick soup entered his stomach, and the heat had yet to dissipate when it exploded in his stomach like a bomb. His stomach began to cramp, and the pain inside his body was not any easier than breaking his limbs. Rip! With a crisp sound, Fox's clothes burst into pieces, and dragon scales appeared on his body immediately after. His body also expanded rapidly, and the chair behind him was crushed into pieces. He turned into a 30-meter-tall frost dragon in the blink of an eye. Roar! The frost dragon raised his head and roared angrily. At the same time, he spat out a red pillar of fire. "Fuck, is this hot pot drugged? It can even change the attributes." Jinx was shocked. This was the first time he had seen a frost dragon spitting fire in his life. The other 3 frost dragons were also shocked, but they were all big bosses, so they did not dare to say anything. They could only look at Fox worriedly. Harrison hugged the bowl and trembled. He did not forget to scoop up the duck intestine from the pot and put it into his bowl before heaving a sigh of relief. He almost became old. However, looking at the 30-meter-tall frost dragon next to him, he was suddenly a little worried about himself. He was the one who recommended the insanely spicy. Would this frost dragon, who had been smashed in the head by a pig, come and settle the score with him after everything was over? That deputy lord looked up at the enlarged Fox and calmly asked, "You've become so big. Do you want to fight?" In the eyes of a powerhouse, there was no difference between a worm and a bigger worm. Fox knew this very well, so he immediately shrunk into a pocket-sized dragon about 3 meters tall, but he still maintained his dragon form. His body was recovering, and he could not continue to maintain his human form. He could only turn into his dragon form. With a long face, he said, "My lord, don't misunderstand. I can only turn into this. Since you like hot pot, then finish the dishes and the soup. If you want to tear down Amy's in the future, come and tell me first. If I don't get to eat the red braised pork, then I will tear down Frost Dragon Island," the deputy lord said seriously. "Yes, yes." Fox quickly nodded. He was very aggrieved, but he did not dare to show it on his face. He even had the thought of dying. Seeing that Fox had admitted defeat, the customers returned to their seats and continued to enjoy the food. Jinx glanced at Fox, who was obediently eating the hot pot, and then stared at Yabamiya, who was busy walking among the customers in the restaurant. He muttered to himself, "I have to talk to this little girl later. The child of a golden dragon cannot wander outside." Chapter 1247. "Uncle, your duck intestine is going to be old if you don't scoop it out," Harrison couldn't help but remind Jinx, who was in a daze. "Old?" Jinx took his chopsticks out of the hot pot, and looked at the curled-up duck intestine with confusion. "Isn't it already dead?" "Old means past the best time to eat it," Harrison explained helplessly. Indeed, some terms were not universal. "Then let me try this duck intestine." Jinx didn't care about Harrison's words, and put the piece of duck intestine into his mouth. The spiciness was still the main theme, but after chewing the insanely spicy chili, his resistance to insanely spicy had increased significantly. He didn't care about his burning taste buds, and chewed on the duck intestine. Apart from the numbing spiciness, the crispy duck intestine gave Jinx's teeth a new and refreshing experience. As his taste buds gradually got used to the spiciness, the fragrance under the spiciness began to show its power. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became, and the coldness from sitting in the snow was also dispelled. "Delicious." Jinx gave a thumbs up. However, this small piece of duck intestine wasn't enough to fill the gaps between his teeth, so he picked up 2 plates of duck intestine and poured it into the red soup pot in front of him. "Duck intestine isn't eaten like this." Harrison raised his hand to stop him, but it was too late. He looked at the duck intestine that had already been poured into the hot pot. This was blasphemy. Harrison tried his best to control his emotions as he said, "Duck intestine has to be dipped with chopsticks. The best time to eat it is when the duck intestine is dipped 8 times. Only then will the duck intestine have a soul. The way you eat it is too sissy. It's not suitable for us giant dragons." Jinx pursed his lips in disdain. He picked up a plate of beef and poured it into the hot pot. He stirred it with his chopsticks, and started eating when the soup boiled again. "That's a good idea." The eyes of the golden dragons, who were still carefully calculating the time, lit up, and they all followed suit. Otherwise, with their 10 portions, they might not be able to finish it by tomorrow morning. "This is really silly." Harrison swallowed the last few words for the sake of his own safety. Out of sight, out of mind, he continued to dip his tripe elegantly. The irritable and insanely spicy didn't let the dragons off the hook. Just as the dragons were praising how delicious the hot pot was, they started transforming uncontrollably. In the end, they could only shrink to the size of Fox and continue to stand up and eat the hot pot. Under the gazes of the dragons, Harrison, the little fatty, continued to sit quietly and enjoy the hot pot. This also attracted everyone's attention. This was a true hero. The novel way of eating hot pot brought a brand new dining experience to the guests. It even gave many people a strange illusion. "Hubby, I think my culinary skills have improved greatly. Let me cook for you at home in the future," Bonnie said confidently as she took a bite of the potato. The pale-faced Vicenio had just recovered from the frenzied attacks in the afternoon. Hearing Bonnie's words, he hurriedly shook his head. "Why? You don't think my cooking is good?" Bonnie pulled a long face. "No, I'm just worried that the oil will stain your delicate little hands. How can I let you do such a thing?" Vicenio hurriedly shook his head with a shy smile. "That's true." Bonnie raised her pinky finger and looked at her delicate little hands. It was such a pity to use them to do housework. "That's right. My hands have more important things to do." Bonnie's hand pinched Vicenio's thigh under the table. She licked her bright red lips, and her smile gradually turned wretched. Vicenio's throat moved. He suddenly wanted to go next door and order 2 more Ruggiamos. Who could resist that? I think the best cooked vegetable is the lotus root slice. It's crispy and delicious. It's too delicious. Vanessa chewed on the lotus root slice. It was just right for the hardness, and didn't put much pressure on her teeth. However, Abraham shook his head, and said, I think the enoki mushroom is better. The enoki mushroom has absorbed the essence of the red soup. It's fresh and delicious, and tastes even better than ordinary mushrooms. It's the king of the vegetarian hot pot. What's so good about vegetables? Are you sure you don't want to try the pig's brain? This pig's brain is more tender than tofu pudding. After soaking in the red soup, the taste is even better. It's simply too dreamy. Randy picked up the ladle, and scooped up a pig's brain from the red soup. He looked at everyone and recommended it seriously. Vanessa and Laura shook their heads at the same time. This pig's brain looked scarier than they had expected. When they thought about how it was dug out from a pig's brain, they instantly lost their desire to eat it. Can you share some with me to try? Abraham asked hesitantly. Since you treated me to a meal yesterday, I'll bear the pain and share half of the pig's brain with you. Randy had a pained expression on his face. He scooped half of the pig's brain into his bowl, and put the other half into Abraham's bowl. Abraham picked up the ladle and scooped up half a ladle of the pig's brain. The pig's brain, which still had some traces of blood when it was put into the pot, had already turned completely white. It was wrapped in a layer of red soup, and looked very tempting. The spicy red soup automatically removed all the fishy smell, and the spicy aroma mixed with a unique fragrance wafted over. As a glutton, this was also the first time Abraham tried an animal's brain. Before this, he had never heard of anyone eating a pig's brain. He finished half a ladle of pig's brain in one mouthful. The appropriate spiciness first made the taste buds tense up, and then the pig's brain melted in the mouth. The tender texture was indeed similar to tofu pudding, but the tofu pudding's texture was much more refreshing, while the pig's brain's texture was more soft and sticky. The fragrant taste blossomed on the tip of the tongue, and together with the spiciness, it brought about a unique and delicious enjoyment. This taste is simply amazing. Abraham was intoxicated. If the duck intestine and tripe were a beautiful song for the teeth, then this pig's brain was an existence that brought joy to the taste buds. After finishing half of the pig's brain in a few mouthfuls, Abraham still felt that he was not satisfied. He raised his hand and ordered 3 more pig's brains. Listen to me, right? Randy was a little proud. Even pig's brains can be used as an ingredient. There's really nothing that can't be used in hot pot. Mr. Mac's creation will most likely leave a thick mark in the history of food and beverage. Abraham nodded and could not help but sigh. Only Mr. Mac can be the first to carry on the legacy of the past and open up a new path for the future. Randy nodded in agreement. If a chef only made a family dish to the extreme, then he could only be considered a good chef, but not a master chef. However, Mr. Mac was different. Every new dish he made was a surprise. His exquisite and unique cooking methods had the ability to subvert the current food and beverage industry. It was very normal for a hot pot meal to take 1 to 2 hours, so many customers waited for a long time before they could get a seat. Meanwhile, the fox finally finished the last mouthful of soup after the customers changed seats. It flew away with blue flames spurting out of its mouth. Calm. Wonderful book house. Calm, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.